Hello, my friends, and welcome. I'm so glad you decided to join me tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights, find your most comfortable chair, and leave the busyness of the world behind. While you're getting settled, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Your engagement truly helps, and the more you interact, the more these chilling tales will find their way back to your feed. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to share a few stories that are as true as they are unsettling. So, take a deep breath, get cozy, and let's explore the dark together.
The email arrived at 2:47 a.m., though Marcus wouldn't see it until morning. The subject line read, "Congratulations, you've won a free flight." He almost deleted it with the rest of the spam, but something made him pause. The sender wasn't a jumble of random letters or a suspicious foreign domain. It simply said, "Departure Services." Marcus clicked it open. "Dear Marcus Chen, you've been selected for a complimentary one-way flight. Your departure is scheduled for March 15th at 11:59 p.m. No booking required. No confirmation needed. Your seat has already been assigned. We look forward to having you on board. Departure Services." There was no unsubscribe link, no company logo, no terms and conditions. Just those words, stark and black against the white screen. Marcus laughed and deleted it. Free flights didn't exist. Everyone knew that. But, over the following days, the email kept returning. He'd delete it, and it would reappear in his inbox the next morning. Always time-stamped at 2:47 a.m. He marked it as spam. It came back. He blocked the sender. It came back. He created a filter to automatically trash anything from that address. The email arrived anyway, sitting in his inbox like it had never left. By the 5th day, Marcus had stopped deleting it. By the 7th day, he'd started dreaming about airplanes. The dreams were always the same. He stood in an airport terminal he didn't recognize. No signs, no advertisements, no other passengers. Just endless rows of empty seats facing windows that looked out onto absolute darkness. No runway lights. No parked aircraft. Nothing but a void so complete it seemed to pull at him, drawing his eyes deeper and deeper into its depths, until he woke gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. Marcus told himself it was stress. Work had been brutal lately, and his sleep schedule was a disaster. The dreams meant nothing. The email meant nothing. But, on March 10th, 5 days before the date mentioned in the message, Marcus received a boarding pass in the mail. The envelope had no return address. His name was printed on the front, in neat, typewritten letters. Inside, he found a single piece of cardstock, heavier than any boarding pass he'd ever held. It was black, completely black, except for white text that read, "Passenger, Marcus Chen, Flight DS-1000, departure 11:59 p.m., seat 23A." The destination line was blank, not redacted or smudged, simply empty, as if the information had never been there at all. Marcus's hands trembled as he held it. He told himself someone was playing a prank. A coworker with a dark sense of humor. An ex-girlfriend who'd always said he needed to lighten up. There had to be an explanation. He threw the boarding pass in the trash. That night he found it on his nightstand when he woke from another dream of the empty terminal. March 12th. Marcus started asking around. Had anyone else received strange emails? Mysterious boarding passes? His coworkers looked at him like he was losing his mind. His friends suggested he take a vacation. His mother, when he called her, asked if he was sleeping enough. "You sound tired, Marcus," she said. "You sound so tired." He didn't tell her about the dreams. He didn't tell her that the empty terminal had started to feel familiar, almost welcoming. He didn't tell her that last night, for the first time, he'd seen an airplane through those dark windows. A massive silhouette with no lights, no markings, just a shape against the void, waiting. "I'm fine, Mom," he said. "Just busy with work." He wasn't fine. He knew he wasn't fine. But he didn't know what to do about it. March 14th. One day before the departure date, Marcus hadn't slept in 36 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the terminal, the empty seats, the dark windows, the plane that waited in the void. He'd started taking caffeine pills to stay awake, but his hands shook constantly now, and his thoughts felt sluggish and strange, like they were moving through thick syrup. He tried to work, but the numbers on his spreadsheets kept rearranging themselves into the same pattern. 23A, 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 his seat assignment, over and over, appearing in financial reports and email chains, and even the date stamps on his files. At 2:47 p.m. he noticed the time. Couldn't help but notice it. Marcus finally broke. He searched for departure services online. Nothing. He searched for Flight D1000. Nothing. He searched for free plane ticket scam and mysterious boarding pass in every combination of words he could think of, and he found nothing, 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 until he found the forum. It was buried deep in the search results. A small, text-only website that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The thread was titled, "Has anyone else received a ticket from departure services?" Marcus's blood went cold. The first post was from 2003. Got a weird email about a free flight. Boarding pass showed up in my mail a few days later. Destination was blank. Flight is scheduled for tomorrow. Anyone know what this is about? Feels like a scam, but I can't figure out the angle. There were no replies to that post. But there were other posts below it, from different users spanning years. 2007, same thing happened to me. Email. Boarding pass. Dreams about an empty airport. My flight is in 2 days. I'm scared. 2011. I got the ticket. I'm not going to the airport. I refuse. This has to be a joke. 2015. The boarding pass keeps coming back. I burned it. It was on my pillow when I woke up. What is happening to me? 2019. I found this forum too late. My sister received the ticket last month. She didn't believe it. She laughed it off. On the night of her departure date, she went to bed early, said she was tired. In the morning, she was gone. Not dead gone. Her bed was empty. Her car was still in the driveway. The police found no evidence of foul play. It's like she just departed. Marcus read that last post 3 times. Then he read it again. She just departed. He scrolled down, desperate for more information, but the thread ended there. The last post was from 2019, and the user had never posted again. He tried to reply, to ask questions, to beg for answers. But when he clicked the button to create an account, the website crashed. When he tried to reload it, the URL led nowhere. The forum was gone, as if it had never existed, as if it had only appeared long enough for Marcus to find it. He sat at his computer, staring at the error message, and felt something cold settle into his chest. Tomorrow was March 15th. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he started to drift off, he felt a pull, something tugging at him from the edges of consciousness, drawing him toward the terminal in his dreams. He fought it with coffee and energy drinks and loud music and cold showers, anything to keep himself anchored in the waking world. At 11 p.m. on March 15th, he was sitting in his living room with every light on, clutching the black boarding pass in his hands. He'd stopped trying to throw it away. It always came back. Flight DS1000. Departure 11:59 p.m. Seat 23A. The email arrived at 2:47 a.m., though Marcus wouldn't see it until morning. The subject line read, "Congratulations, you've won a free flight." He almost deleted it with the rest of the spam, but something made him pause. The sender wasn't a jumble of random letters or a suspicious foreign domain. It simply said, "Departure Services." Marcus clicked it open. "Dear Marcus Chen, you have been selected for a complimentary one-way flight. Your departure is scheduled for March 15th at 11:59 p.m. No booking required. No confirmation needed. Your seat has already been assigned. We look forward to having you on board. Departure Services." There was no unsubscribe link, no company logo, no terms and conditions, just those words stark and black against the white screen. Marcus laughed and deleted it. Free flights didn't exist. Everyone knew that. But over the following days, the email kept returning. He'd delete it, and it would reappear in his inbox the next morning, always timestamped at 2:47 a.m. He marked it as spam. It came back. He blocked the sender. It came back. He created a filter to automatically trash anything from that address. The email arrived anyway, sitting in his inbox like it had never left. By the 5th day, Marcus had stopped deleting it. By the 7th day, he'd started dreaming about airplanes. The dreams were always the same. He stood in an airport terminal he didn't recognize. No signs, no advertisements, no other passengers. Just endless rows of empty seats facing windows that looked out onto absolute darkness. No runway lights, no parked aircraft, nothing but a void so complete it seemed to pull at him, drawing his eyes deeper and deeper into its depths until he woke, gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. Marcus told himself it was stress. Work had been brutal lately and his sleep schedule was a disaster. The dreams meant nothing. The email meant nothing. But on March 10th, 5 days before the date mentioned in the message, Marcus received a boarding pass in the mail. The envelope had no return address. His name was printed on the front in neat, typewritten letters. Inside, he found a single piece of cardstock, heavier than any boarding pass he'd ever held. It was black, completely black, except for white text that read, "Passenger Marcus Chen, Flight D-Ace 1000, Departure 11:59 p.m., Seat 23, 18. The destination line was blank, not redacted or smudged, simply empty, as if the information had never been there at all. Marcus's hands trembled as he held it. He told himself someone was playing a prank, a co-worker with a dark sense of humor, an ex-girlfriend who'd always said he needed to lighten up. There had to be an explanation. He threw the boarding pass in the trash. That night he found it on his nightstand when he woke from another dream of the empty terminal. March 12th. Marcus started asking around. Had anyone else received strange emails? Mysterious boarding passes? His coworkers looked at him like he was losing his mind. His friends suggested he take a vacation. His mother, when he called her, asked if he was sleeping enough. "You sound tired, Marcus," she said. "You sound so tired." He didn't tell her about the dreams. He didn't tell her that the empty terminal had started to feel familiar, almost welcoming. He didn't tell her that last night. For the first time, he'd seen an airplane through those dark windows. A massive silhouette, with no lights, no markings. Just a shape against the void, waiting. "I'm fine, Mom," he said. "Just busy with work." He wasn't fine. He knew he wasn't fine. But he didn't know what to do about it. March 14th. One day before the departure date, Marcus hadn't slept in 36 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the terminal. The empty seats. The dark windows. The plane that waited in the void. He'd started taking caffeine pills to stay awake, but his hands shook constantly now, and his thoughts felt sluggish and strange, like they were moving through thick syrup. He tried to work, but the numbers on his spreadsheets kept rearranging themselves into the same pattern. 23A, 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 23A. His seat assignment. Over and over. Appearing in financial reports and email chains and even the date stamps on his files. At 2:47 p.m., he noticed the time. Couldn't help but notice it. Marcus finally broke. He searched for departure services online. Nothing. He searched for Flight D's 1000. Nothing. He searched for Flight D's 5000. He searched for free plane tickets, scam, and mysterious boarding pass, and every combination of words he could think of, and he found nothing. 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 Until he found the forum. It was buried deep in the search results. A small text-only website that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The thread was titled, "Has anyone else received a ticket from departure services?" Marcus's blood went cold. The first post was from 2003. Got a weird email about a free flight. Boarding pass showed up in my mail a few days later. Destination was blank. Flight is scheduled for tomorrow. Anyone know what this is about? Feels like a scam, but I can't figure out the angle. There were no replies to that post. But there were other posts below it, from different users spanning years. 2007, same thing happened to me. Email, boarding pass, dreams about an empty airport. My flight is in 2 days. I'm scared. 2011, I got the ticket. I'm not going to the airport. I refuse. This has to be a joke. 2015, the boarding pass keeps coming back. I burned it. It was on my pillow when I woke up. What is happening to me? 2019, I found this forum too late. My sister received the ticket last month. She didn't believe it. She laughed it off. On the night of her departure date, she went to bed early, said she was tired. In the morning, she was gone. Not dead gone. Her bed was empty. Her car was still in the driveway. The police found no evidence of foul play. It's like she just departed. Marcus read that last post 3 times. Then he read it again. She just departed. He scrolled down, desperate for more information, but the thread ended there. The last post was from 2019, and the user had never posted again. He tried to reply, to ask questions, to beg for answers. But when he clicked the button to create an account, the website crashed. When he tried to reload it, the URL led nowhere. The forum was gone, as if it had never existed, as if it had only appeared long enough for Marcus to find it. He sat at his computer, staring at the error message, and felt something cold settle into his chest. Tomorrow was March 15th. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he started to drift off, he felt a pull, something tugging at him from the edges of consciousness, drawing him toward the terminal in his dreams. He fought it with coffee and energy drinks and loud music and cold showers. Anything to keep himself anchored in the waking world. At 11 p.m. on March 15th, he was sitting in his living room with every light on, clutching the black boarding pass in his hands. He'd stopped trying to throw it away. It always came back. Flight DS 1000. Departure 11:59 p.m. Seat 23A. 59 minutes. Marcus considered his options. He could run, get in his car and drive as far as possible before midnight. But something told him distance wouldn't matter. The woman's sister hadn't gone to any airport and she'd still departed. He could stay awake, never sleep again. But his eyes were already burning, his body screaming for rest after so many sleepless hours. He wouldn't last another night, let alone the rest of his life. He could accept it, stop fighting, board the plane, and see where it took him. That thought should have terrified him. Instead, it brought a strange sense of calm. Marcus looked at the boarding pass in his hands. The blank destination line seemed less ominous now, more like a promise. A promise that wherever he was going, it was somewhere new, somewhere else. somewhere away from the spreadsheets and the office politics, and the grinding mundanity of a life that had started to feel like a slow death long before the email arrived. Maybe that was why he'd been selected. Maybe departure services only sent tickets to people who were already ready to leave. At 11:45 p.m., Marcus's eyelids began to droop. At 11:50, he stopped fighting. At 11:55, he let his eyes close. The terminal was waiting for him. It was exactly as he remembered from his dreams, but sharper now, more real. The empty seats stretched in endless rows. The dark windows reflected nothing. And there, at the far end of the terminal, a gate had appeared, gate 23, marked with a soft white glow. Marcus walked toward it. His footsteps made no sound. The boarding pass in his hand felt weightless, like it was made of shadow rather than cardstock. As he approached the gate, he saw others, passengers, dozens of them, standing in a silent line. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They simply waited, each holding their own black boarding pass, each staring straight ahead at the gate with expressions of perfect, peaceful acceptance. Marcus joined the line. The passenger in front of him was an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She turned slightly, and though her lips didn't move, Marcus heard her voice in his mind. "Don't be afraid. The flight is smooth. The destination is worth the journey." What is the destination? Marcus thought back. The woman smiled. Home. The line moved forward. One by one, the passengers approached the gate and stepped through, not onto a jetway or an airplane, but into the darkness beyond the window. The void swallowed them without sound, without resistance, and they were gone. Marcus reached the front of the line. A figure stood at the gate. The figure was a generous term. It was more like an absence of light, shaped roughly like a person, a silhouette cut from the fabric of reality itself. "Boarding pass, please," the figure said. Its voice was neither male nor female, neither old nor young. It simply was. Marcus handed over the black card. The figure examined it, though it had no eyes to see with. Then it nodded, or performed some motion that suggested nodding, and stepped aside. "Welcome aboard flight these Yuazan, Mr. Chen. We hope you enjoy your departure." Marcus stepped forward. The void waited beyond the gate, vast and dark and hungry. He hesitated at the threshold. Behind him, the terminal was already fading, the other passengers dissolving into mist. The entire world of his life, his apartment, his job, his mother who worried about him, his friends who thought he worked too hard, all of it slipping away like water through cupped hands. Is this death? He wondered. Is that what departure means? But, even as he thought it, he knew the answer was more complicated than that. Death was an ending. This felt like a beginning. Marcus took a breath. Then he stepped into the dark. The plane was beautiful. That was his first thought, as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior light. The seats were plush and comfortable, upholstered in something softer than leather, darker than velvet. The aisles were wide and empty except for other passengers finding their seats, each moving with the same quiet acceptance Marcus felt in himself. He found row 23. Seat A was by the window. Of course it was by the window. Marcus sat down and looked out at the void. It was different from this side, not empty, but full of stars that didn't twinkle, full of colors that had no names, full of shapes that moved and shifted at the edges of perception. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was everything he'd never known he was looking for. A voice came over the intercom. The same voice from the gate, neither male nor female, neither old nor young. "Good evening, passengers. Welcome aboard flight D7. Our flight time tonight is undefined. Please remain seated until we reach our destination. On behalf of departure services, we thank you for choosing to fly with us. We know you had a choice in carriers. And we're grateful you chose us for this, your final journey. Final journey. The words should have frightened him. They didn't. The plane began to move not with the rumble of engines or the roar of thrust, but with a silent glide, like a ship cutting through calm water. Outside the window, the void parted to let them through. Marcus leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He thought about his life, the years he'd spent chasing promotions that didn't matter, accumulating possessions that brought no joy, maintaining relationships that had slowly hollowed out from the inside. He'd been dying long before the email arrived. The ticket from departure services wasn't a death sentence. It was an escape hatch. The passenger beside him, a young man with sad eyes and fresh scars on his wrists, seemed to sense his thoughts. "We all got here the same way," the young man said quietly. "We were all ready to leave. The ticket just showed us the door." "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. The young man shrugged. "Does it matter? Anywhere is better than where we were." Marcus considered this. Then he nodded. "I suppose you're right. The flight lasted forever." The flight lasted no time at all. Marcus drifted in and out of something like sleep. Though sleep wasn't quite the right word. It was more like dissolution, a gentle unmaking of the boundaries between himself and everything else. He felt his memories loosening, his fears fading, his identity becoming something fluid and shapeless. He didn't mind. The self he was losing had never fit him properly anyway. At some point hours later, days, years, the voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please ensure your seat is in the upright position and your tray table is stowed. We will be arriving at our destination shortly." Marcus opened his eyes. Outside the window, the void had changed. The formless dark was giving way to something else, a light, soft and golden, growing brighter as the plane descended. It wasn't sunlight. It wasn't firelight. It was something older and kinder, a warmth that seemed to reach through the glass and wrap around his heart. "What is that?" he whispered. The elderly woman from the terminal was somehow beside him now, though he didn't remember her sitting there. She smiled the same gentle smile. "Home," she said. "I told you. The destination is home. But I don't understand. You will. When we land, you will." The light grew brighter. The plane shuddered once, twice, then settled into a smooth glide. Below them, below? Beside? Within? Marcus could see shapes forming in the golden glow. Trees that weren't trees. Rivers that weren't rivers. Mountains and valleys and endless fields of something that might have been grass if grass could grow in colors beyond the visible spectrum. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was familiar in a way that made his chest ache with longing. The plane touched down without a sound. "Welcome to your destination," the intercom voice said. "Thank you for flying with departure services. Please remember to take all personal belongings or what remains of them as you exit the aircraft. We hope you enjoy your eternal stay." The cabin doors opened. Light flooded in, pure golden. Absolute. Marcus stood. His legs didn't shake. His heart didn't race. He felt only peace, vast and complete, as he walked down the aisle toward the exit. At the door, he paused and looked back. The plane was empty now. The other passengers were gone, already departed into the light. Only the darkness of the cabin remained behind him, and even that was fading. Marcus took one last breath of the old world. Then he stepped forward into the new one. The light swallowed him whole. The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. Jennifer Martinez was just getting home from her late shift at the hospital when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the notification, expecting spam. "Congratulations, you've won a free flight." She almost deleted it. But something made her pause, a whisper at the edge of her mind, a feeling like being watched by something vast and patient. "Sender. Departure services." Jennifer opened the email. and somewhere in the darkness beyond the world, a plane waited for its next passenger. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me in January of 2023, and I need you to understand that I am not asking you to believe me. I am not asking you to accept what I saw as fact. I am simply telling you what happened, what I witnessed, what followed me home. Because even now, 18 months later, I still see him sometimes, standing under streetlights, watching from the tree line behind my house, always smiling, never blinking, never feeling the cold. My name is Daniel Foster, and I'm a railroad conductor for Amtrak's Empire Builder Line, which runs from Chicago to Seattle through some of the most isolated and brutal winter terrain in the continental United States. I have worked this route for 9 years. I have seen blizzards that lasted for days. I have seen temperatures drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. I have seen ice storms that turned entire forests into crystal graveyards. But, until that night in January, I had never seen anything that made me question the basic laws of reality. The incident occurred on January 14th, 2023, during one of the worst winter storms to hit Montana in decades. Our train, the westbound Empire Builder number 7, was traveling through a particularly remote section of track approximately 60 miles west of Harvey, Montana, when we encountered mechanical difficulties. The extreme cold had caused a brake line to freeze and rupture, forcing us to make an emergency stop in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We were stranded on a single track surrounded by endless miles of frozen prairie, with the nearest town 23 miles away. The temperature outside was -27 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill pushing it to -50. The blizzard was reducing visibility to less than 10 feet. According to our protocols, we would need to wait for a repair crew to reach us from Havre, which in these conditions could take 6 to 8 hours. There were 42 passengers on board. I made an announcement explaining the situation, assuring everyone that we had heat, food, and water, and that they should remain in their seats while we waited for assistance. Most passengers were understanding. A few were frustrated but cooperative. And then there was one passenger who concerned me. He was sitting in the last car alone in a window seat near the rear door. I had noticed him when we departed from Chicago because he was not dressed appropriately for winter travel, while other passengers wore heavy coats, scarves, hats, and gloves. This man was dressed in nothing but a thin white dress shirt and dark slacks. No jacket, no coat, no winter gear of any kind. I had approached him during our stop in St. Paul, Minnesota, and asked if he needed assistance acquiring warmer clothing. He had looked at me with pale blue eyes and smiled politely. "I do not feel cold," he said. His voice was soft, calm, almost monotone. I have never felt cold. I assumed he was mentally ill or suffering from some condition that affected his temperature perception. I made a note to keep an eye on him during the journey, but he had caused no problems. He simply sat in his seat, staring out the window, occasionally smiling at nothing in particular. When we made the emergency stop in the blizzard, I went through each car checking on passengers. When I reached the last car and looked toward the back, the man's seat was empty. The rear door, which should have been locked, was standing open. Wind and snow were pouring into the car. I ran to the door and looked outside. In the howling whiteness of the blizzard, I could barely see 10 feet in any direction. But there, standing approximately 50 yards from the train, was the man. He was not moving, not walking away, just standing there in the storm, in his thin shirt and slacks with snow accumulating on his shoulders and hair. I grabbed my radio and called the head conductor. "We have a passenger outside the train. I am going to retrieve him." I put on my heavy winter coat, my hat, my gloves. I wrapped a scarf around my face, and I climbed down from the train into the storm. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The wind cut through my layers immediately. My exposed skin began to sting within seconds. I could feel ice forming in my eyelashes. I started walking toward the man, shouting at him to come back to the train. He did not respond. He just stood there. As I got closer, I could see that he was smiling. The same polite, empty smile I had seen before. And he was not shivering. He was not hunching against the wind. He was standing perfectly upright, perfectly still, as if he were standing in a comfortable room rather than a deadly blizzard. I reached him and grabbed his arm. His shirt was soaked through with melted snow. His skin should have been ice cold. But when I touched him, I felt nothing. Not cold. Not warm. Just nothing. Like touching a mannequin. "Sir, you need to come back to the train right now. You are going to freeze to death out here." He turned his head slowly to look at me. His smile widened slightly. "I told you," he said. "I do not feel cold. I have been cold for a very long time." His words made no sense. I tried to pull him back toward the train, but he would not move. He was impossibly heavy, as if his feet were rooted to the ground. And then I noticed something that made my blood freeze in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. His breath. In air this cold, you can see your breath as vapor. My breath was creating thick clouds of white fog with every exhale. But the man was not breathing. No vapor. No fog. Nothing. According to medical research on hypothermia, human beings can survive in extreme cold for limited periods if properly dressed and moving. But exposure to temperatures below -20 degrees Fahrenheit will cause frostbite in exposed skin within 10 to 15 minutes. At -50 degrees with wind chill, that time drops to less than 5 minutes. This man had been standing in the storm for at least 10 minutes in nothing but a shirt. His exposed hands and face should have been showing clear signs of frostbite. But his skin looked normal. Pale, but normal. I let go of his arm and stepped back. "Who are you?" He tilted his head slightly as if considering the question. "I was a passenger on a train once. A long time ago. In the winter. There was a storm. We stopped, and we never started again." I pulled out my radio. "I need backup at the rear of the train, immediately." The man's smile faded. "You should go back inside, Mr. Foster. The storm is getting worse, and I have been waiting a very long time to talk to someone. But you are not ready yet. You are still warm. Still alive. Give it time." He turned away from me and began walking into the storm. I shouted after him, but he disappeared into the white within seconds. I ran back to the train and climbed inside, my hands shaking from cold and fear. I reported what happened to the head conductor. We searched the area around the train for over an hour, once the storm subsided enough to make it safe. We found no footprints, no tracks, no sign that anyone had been standing in that location. The snow where he had stood was undisturbed, as if no one had ever been there. When we finally got the brake line repaired and continued on to Seattle, I checked the passenger manifest. The seat where the man had been sitting was listed as empty. There was no record of anyone purchasing a ticket for that seat. No record of anyone boarding at that location. According to Amtrak's records, that man did not exist. But I saw him. I touched him. I spoke to him. And over the following weeks, I began to research historical train incidents in Montana during winter storms. What I found made me sick to my stomach. On March 1st, 1910, 2 passenger trains were trapped by a blizzard near Wellington, Washington, in the Cascade Mountains. After 9 days of being stranded, an avalanche struck the trains and swept them into a ravine, killing 96 people. It was the deadliest avalanche in United States history. Many of the bodies were not recovered until July, buried under 40 feet of snow. Some were never found. But that was not the only incident. In February of 1922, a passenger train became stranded during a blizzard in northern Montana, approximately 70 miles from where I encountered the men. The train ran out of fuel for its heating system. 17 passengers froze to death before rescue crews could reach them. The conductor's report stated that several passengers in the final stages of hypothermia removed their clothing and walked out into the storm, a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia victims feel intensely hot and remove their clothes in the final minutes before death. None of those passengers were ever found. In January of 1949, another train was stranded near the same location during a blizzard. 8 passengers died from exposure. The survivors reported that in the hours before rescue arrived, they saw figures walking past the train in the storm. People in summer clothing. People who should not have been there. When rescue crews arrived, they found footprints around the train that led away into the wilderness. The footprints were barefoot, in negative 30-degree weather. I began to notice a pattern. Every 10 to 15 years there is a major winter storm in this region, and every time there are reports of people being seen in the storm. People who are not dressed for the weather, people who do not shiver, people who smile. And after each storm, at least one person goes missing, walks away from shelter into the blizzard, and is never found. I requested a transfer to a different route. My request was denied. I am the senior conductor on the Empire Builder. I know the line better than anyone. They need me. 3 months after my encounter with the man, in April of 2023, I was working the westbound route again. We were passing through the same area where we had broken down in January. It was late evening, just after sunset. I was in the last car doing a final passenger check before we reached the next station. That is when I saw him again. He was standing beside the tracks, maybe 200 yards from the train, illuminated by the moonlight. Same white shirt, same dark slacks, same polite smile. He was not moving, just standing there, watching the train pass. I pressed my face against the window and stared at him. As the train moved past, he turned his head slowly, keeping eye contact with me the entire time. And then he raised one hand and waved. A slow, deliberate wave, like someone saying hello to an old friend. I have seen him 4 more times since then. Always along that stretch of track, always standing far enough away that I cannot reach him, always watching, always smiling. 2 weeks ago, I had a day off and decided to do some research at the Montana Historical Society in Helena. I requested access to old newspaper archives from the 1920s. I was looking for more information about the 1922 incident where the passengers froze on the stranded train. I found the article. But I also found something else. A photograph. It was taken by a reporter who had traveled to the scene after the storm passed. The photograph showed the frozen train surrounded by rescue workers and survivors. And in the background of the photograph, barely visible, standing at the tree line approximately 100 feet from the train, was a man. He was wearing a white shirt and dark slacks, and even in the grainy, century-old photograph, I could see that he was smiling. He was the same man I had encountered, the exact same face, the exact same clothes, in a photograph taken over 100 years ago. I have been having dreams lately. In the dreams, I'm on a train. It is winter. There is a storm. We stop, and I get off the train to help someone. But when I step outside, I realize I am not wearing my coat. I am wearing just a shirt and slacks. And I do not feel cold. I have never felt cold. I wake up from these dreams in a panic, my heart racing. But the fear fades quickly, because deep down, part of me is not afraid anymore. Part of me is curious. Part of me wants to know what happens next. Last week, I was home alone. It was late evening. I was sitting in my living room when I looked out the window and saw him. He was standing under the streetlight across from my house. Same white shirt, same dark slacks, same smile. Just standing there in the middle of winter in Montana and sub-zero temperatures, not moving, not shivering, not breathing. I went to the window and stared at him. We made eye contact. He raised his hand and pointed at me. Not a threatening gesture, just a simple point, as if to say, I see you, I know you, you are next. I blinked, and he was gone. But when I went outside to check, there were footprints in the snow leading from under the streetlight to my front yard. And then the footprints stopped, mid-stride, as if the person making them had simply vanished into thin air. I do not know what he is. I do not know what he wants. But I know this. He is not human. He is not alive in any sense that we understand. He is something that exists in the cold. Something that was once a person, but is now something else. Something that freezes and waits and watches and collects. I have been researching every missing person case in Montana over the past century. Every unsolved disappearance during winter storms. Every person who walked away from shelter and was never found. There are dozens of cases, maybe hundreds. And I am starting to believe they are all connected, that they all walked toward the same thing, toward him, toward the cold that never ends. I do not know how much time I have left. I can feel something changing in me. I notice the cold less now. My winter coat feels too heavy. My heated car feels suffocating. I find myself standing outside for long periods, just feeling the wind, feeling the snow, feeling the temperature drop, and I am not uncomfortable. I am calm. I am peaceful. Last night, I stood outside for 3 hours in negative 15-degree weather wearing just a shirt. When I finally went back inside, I checked my hands and face for frostbite. There was nothing. No damage. No redness. No pain. I should have lost fingers, but my skin was fine. I am writing this down because I want there to be a record. I want someone to know what happened. When I disappear, and I believe I will disappear soon, I want people to understand that I did not choose this. That something chose me. That the man in the white shirt and dark slacks is real, and he is still out there, still standing by the tracks, still watching for the next person who will join him in the cold. If you take trains through Montana in the winter, if you find yourself on a route that passes through remote, isolated areas during a blizzard, pay attention to what you see outside the windows. If you see a figure standing in the storm, dressed inappropriately, smiling at the train, do not go outside. Do not try to help them. They are not alive. They are not in danger. They are waiting, and if you go to them, you will join them. The cold is patient. The cold is permanent. And the cold is always looking for new companions. I can see him right now as I write this. He is standing in my backyard. It is snowing. The temperature is negative 12 degrees Fahrenheit. He is not wearing a coat. He is just standing there, smiling, waiting, and I realize now that I am not afraid. I am ready. I understand what he is offering. Freedom from the cold. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the weight of being warm and alive and fragile. I am going outside now. I am leaving this document on my computer so someone will find it. I am walking out into the snow to meet him, to ask him the questions I need answered, to learn what he learned 100 years ago when his train stopped and the storm came and the cold took him. If you're reading this, it means I did not come back inside. It means I joined the others, the ones who stand in the storm, the ones who never feel cold, the ones who wait by the tracks for the next train, the next storm, the next person who will see us and wonder if we are real. We are real. We were passengers once. We had lives. We had families. We had destinations. But the cold found us. And now we are part of it, forever standing, forever watching, forever waiting in the frozen places where the warm people travel through but never stay. Do not follow us. Do not try to save us. We are past saving. We are the cold made flesh. We are the winter that never ends. And we are always recruiting. Goodbye. I need to establish something before I begin. I am a licensed commercial vehicle inspector for the Montana Department of Transportation. I have examined thousands of vehicles over my 17-year career. I understand mechanical systems. I understand physics. I understand the limits of what a vehicle can and cannot do. What I am about to describe violates every principle of mechanical engineering I have ever learned. But I saw it. I documented it. And the evidence exists in state records that will never be made public because no one knows how to explain it. My name is Thomas Garrett, and on February 9th, 2024, I encountered a school bus that should not have been possible. The records show it was decommissioned in 1998. The vehicle identification number was flagged as destroyed in a salvage yard fire in 2003, but I saw it driving on Route 47 in rural Montana during a blizzard. And what I saw inside that bus will haunt me until the day I die. The evening started normally. A massive winter storm was moving through the state, and I had been sent to patrol a stretch of highway known for accidents during severe weather. The temperature was dropping to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility was less than 50 feet, and the wind was strong enough to push my patrol vehicle sideways across the road. At approximately 8:45 p.m., I received a call on my radio from Montana Highway Patrol Dispatch. A motorist had reported seeing a school bus veer off Route 47 and into a ravine approximately 12 miles north of my location. The caller said the bus appeared to be occupied, but they were unable to stop due to the storm conditions. I immediately responded and began driving toward the reported location. The roads were nearly impassable. Snow had drifted across both lanes in several places, and the wind was creating whiteout conditions that made navigation extremely dangerous. According to data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, there are approximately 25,000 school bus accidents per year in the United States. Most involve minor injuries. Fatal school bus accidents are relatively rare, with an average of 6 student deaths per year. But those statistics do not account for incidents that occur off-road, in remote areas, during severe weather conditions. When a school bus goes off the road in a blizzard in rural Montana, the survival window is measured in minutes. Hypothermia can set in within 15 to 30 minutes in temperatures below zero, especially for children. Every second counts. I reached the approximate location given by dispatch at 9:12 p.m. The ravine was visible from the road, a steep embankment dropping roughly 40 feet into a drainage area surrounded by dense pine forest. I activated my emergency lights, grabbed my high-powered flashlight, and began searching the area. That is when I saw it. At the bottom of the ravine, approximately 50 yards from the road, was a school bus. It was positioned at an angle, the front end tilted downward into a snowdrift. But here is what made no sense. The engine was running. I could hear it idling from where I stood at the top of the ravine. The headlights were on. The interior lights were on. Every window was glowing against the darkness and swirling snow. But there were no tracks. The snow around the bus was completely undisturbed except for the depression where the vehicle rested. There were no tire marks leading down the embankment. No disturbed snow indicating a crash. No broken trees or damaged vegetation. It was as if the bus had been placed there, carefully positioned at the bottom of the ravine. I immediately radioed for backup and medical response, then began making my way down the embankment. The slope was steep and covered in ice. I had to move slowly, using pine branches to steady myself. It took me nearly 10 minutes to reach the bus. As I got closer, I could see more details. It was a full-size school bus, yellow with District 42 painted on the side. The paint looked old, faded. The body showed signs of rust and weathering, but the mechanical systems were clearly functioning. The engine hummed steadily. Heat was blasting from the vents. I could see condensation on the windows. I reached the passenger door and pulled it open. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of diesel exhaust and something else. Something wrong. a sweet, chemical smell that I could not identify. I climbed the steps into the bus, and what I saw stopped me cold. Every seat was empty. Not just empty, but pristine. No backpacks, no books, no coats or scarves or gloves, no personal items of any kind. The seats looked like they had been professionally cleaned. Not a single piece of debris, not a gum wrapper or pencil or scrap of paper. But the bus was warm. The heat was blasting at full power. The interior lights were all functioning. The two-way radio mounted near the driver's seat was on, static crackling from the speaker. I moved toward the front of the bus, checking each row as I went. 14 rows of seats on each side. Empty. Completely empty. No signs that anyone had been there recently. No footprints in the accumulated dust on the floor. Then I reached the driver's seat, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a clipboard hanging from the dash. A road sheet, standard school bus documentation showing the scheduled stops, the names of the children to be picked up at each location, the estimated arrival times. The date at the top of the sheet read February 9th, 1998. Exactly 26 years ago to the day. I picked up the clipboard with shaking hands. The route listed 17 stops, 17 children to be picked up for transport to Mackenzie Elementary School in the town of Havre, Montana. Each child's name was handwritten in neat cursive. Each stop had a check mark next to it, indicating the pickup had been completed. But at the bottom of the sheet, in different handwriting much more rushed and panicked, was a single sentence. They are not children anymore. My radio crackled to life. I grabbed it from my belt, expecting to hear dispatch or backup units arriving. But the voice that came through was not from dispatch. It was a child's voice. High, clear, and completely calm. "Mr. Garrett, we have been waiting for you." I froze. The voice knew my name. How could anyone in this bus know my name? I was alone. The bus was empty. I said, "Who is this? Identify yourself." There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. But this time it was not just one voice. It was multiple voices speaking in perfect unison, children's voices. Maybe a dozen of them, all saying the same words at the exact same time. "We never made it to school that day, but we are still on the bus. We have been on the bus for 26 years, and now you are here. That means it is time." I backed away from the driver's seat, my heart pounding. This was not possible. The bus was empty. I had checked every seat. There was no one here. But the voices continued, now coming not from my radio but from all around me, from the empty seats, from the walls, from the floor. "You should leave now, Mr. Garrett, before you become part of the route." On July 15th, 1976, a school bus carrying 26 children and their driver was hijacked near Chowchilla, California. The children were driven to a rock quarry and buried alive in a moving van buried underground. They managed to escape after 16 hours. The incident traumatized an entire generation and changed how we think about child safety. But there are other bus incidents that never made the news. Cases where children got on buses and never arrived at school. Cases where buses were found abandoned with no explanation for where the passengers went. The Chowchilla kidnapping was resolved. The children were found. Justice was served. But not every missing bus has that ending. I ran. I do not care if that makes me sound unprofessional or cowardly. I ran. I scrambled back up the embankment as fast as I could, slipping on ice, tearing my uniform, not caring about anything except getting away from that bus. When I reached my patrol vehicle, I looked back. The bus was still there at the bottom of the ravine, lights glowing, engine running. But now I could see something I had not noticed before. There were shapes moving inside, dark shapes behind the windows, Small figures, child-sized, pressing their hands against the glass. Backup arrived 20 minutes later. 3 patrol vehicles, 2 ambulances, a fire rescue unit. I told them what I had found. They thought I was suffering from hypothermia-induced confusion, but they went down to investigate anyway. When they reached the bus, it was dead. Engine off, lights off, cold. The interior temperature was the same as the outside air, -20 degrees. The route sheet I had seen was gone. The clipboard was empty. The two-way radio was not just off, it was disconnected. The wiring corroded as if it had not worked in decades. They ran the vehicle identification number. The bus was registered to District 42, decommissioned in 1998 after a fatal accident on Route 47. On February 9, 1998, the bus had been transporting 17 children from rural pickup locations to McKinsey Elementary School when it disappeared during a blizzard. The bus and all 17 children were never found. The official investigation concluded that the bus had gone off the road during the storm and was buried under snow and debris. When spring came and the snow melted, it was assumed the wreckage had been washed away in the spring runoff or scavenged for parts. The case was closed. The families were told their children had died in a tragic accident. But the bus I found in that ravine was the same bus, same vehicle identification number, same District 42 markings, same route sheet, listing the same 17 children. 3 days after my encounter, I received a package at my home. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed a school bus at the bottom of a ravine, lights on, engine running, just as I had seen it. But this photograph was not taken by me. It was dated February 9, 2012, exactly 12 years before my encounter. On the back of the photograph, in the same rushed handwriting I had seen on the route sheet, was a message. It comes back every 12 years, on the same date, at the same location, looking for a new driver. I submitted my resignation to the Montana Department of Transportation the following week. I told them I was relocating to Oregon for personal reasons. But the truth is, I am terrified of what will happen in February of 2036. 12 years from my encounter, because if the pattern holds, that bus will appear again. At the bottom of that ravine, lights on, engine running, waiting, and I have a terrible feeling that when it does, I will be compelled to go back, to walk down that embankment, to climb onto that bus, and to take my place behind the wheel, because that is what the bus does. It finds people, it waits for them, and eventually, it takes them. I have researched every available record of missing school buses in North America over the past 50 years. There are more than you would think. Buses that vanished during snowstorms, during fog, during perfectly clear weather. Buses that were found abandoned with no explanation. Buses that were never found at all. In 1989, a bus disappeared in rural Maine carrying 12 children. It was found 3 weeks later in a quarry, engine running, heat on, completely empty. In 2001, a bus in northern Alberta vanished during a blizzard. Search teams found it 2 days later at the bottom of a frozen lake. The engine was still running underwater. In 2015, a bus in rural Pennsylvania was reported missing. It was found 6 hours later, parked at a rest stop, empty, with the driver's logbook showing completed routes that had not yet happened. The common factors are always the same: severe weather, rural locations, the vehicle found running but abandoned, no signs of the passengers. And when authorities investigate, they find records showing the bus had been decommissioned years earlier. I believe these are not separate incidents. I believe they are all connected. I believe there is something about school buses, about the specific combination of children, routine, and isolated roads that creates a vulnerability, a weak point, a place where the normal rules do not apply. And I believe that once a bus crosses that threshold, it does not fully come back. It exists in a state between here and somewhere else. It appears periodically, cycling through time, collecting passengers it should not have, and anyone who boards it becomes part of its route. Forever. The last time I spoke with Montana Highway Patrol about the incident, they told me the bus had been removed from the ravine and sent to a salvage yard for processing. But when I called the salvage yard to confirm, they had no record of receiving it. No paperwork, no vehicle, nothing. I drove back to that ravine 3 months ago. It was summer, the weather clear, the roads dry. I parked at the spot where I had responded to the initial call. I looked down at the ravine, and I saw tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh tracks, leading down the embankment to the spot where the bus had been. But there was no bus, just the tracks. And at the bottom of the ravine, pressed into the soft earth, were footprints. Small footprints. Children's shoe prints. 17 sets of them, leading in a circle around the depression where the bus had rested. And in the center of the circle, scratched into the dirt, was a message. February 9, 2036. We will be waiting. I do not know what will happen when that date arrives. I do not know if I will be alive to see it. I do not know if I will be able to resist the compulsion to return to that place. But I know this. The bus is real. The children on it are real, and whatever force is keeping them there, cycling through time, appearing and disappearing every 12 years, is beyond anything our current understanding of physics or reality can explain. If you are a school bus driver, if you work in transportation, if you live in a rural area where school buses travel isolated roads, please be aware. If you see a bus that seems wrong, that does not match the current fleet, that has outdated markings or old-style equipment, do not approach it. Do not board it. Report it to authorities and leave the area immediately. Because once you step onto that bus, you become part of its route. And the route never ends. The bus never stops. It just keeps driving through time, collecting passengers, waiting for the next scheduled pickup. The children who got on that bus in 1998 thought they were going to school. They never arrived. They are still on the bus, still waiting, still cycling through the same route over and over again. And in 12 years, on February 9th, 2036, the bus will return to that ravine. The lights will be on. The engine will be running. The heat will be blasting. And somewhere inside, 17 children will be sitting in those seats, waiting for their stop, waiting to go home. But they will never go home. Because the bus never stops, and once you are on the route, you are on it forever. I have tried to warn people. I have tried to file reports. But no one wants to believe it. They think I experienced a hallucination brought on by the storm conditions. They think I saw an abandoned bus and my mind filled in the rest. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that in 12 years, I will be faced with a choice. Return to that ravine when the bus appears again, or spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have done something to help those children. I do not know which option is worse. Being on the bus, or being the one who walked away. All I know is that there are some routes that never end, some journeys that have no destination, and some buses that never stop running, no matter how many years pass, no matter how many times they disappear and reappear. The bus is out there, somewhere between here and wherever those children went, still running, still waiting, still collecting passengers for a destination no one ever reaches. And every 12 years, on February 9th, it comes back to the same spot. Lights on. Engine running. Empty seats waiting to be filled. If you ever see it, if you ever encounter a school bus that should not be where it is, that does not match any active fleet, that seems somehow wrong, do not get on. Do not investigate. Just leave. Get as far away as you can. Because the route never ends, and the bus is always looking for its next passenger. What happened to me was not just about a bad date. It was not just about someone lying on a dating app. It was about a predator who used deception as a weapon, who enjoyed trapping and terrifying women, and who is still out there doing it. I am sharing this story because I want women to know that the person in the photos might not be the person who shows up. And when that happens, you need to leave immediately. Do not give them a chance to explain. Do not worry about being rude. Just leave. Because I did not leave fast enough, and what happened next almost cost me my life. My name is Alina, and I am 26 years old. 2 years ago, in February of 2023, I was living in Chicago, working as a graphic designer for a marketing agency. I was single, lonely, and tired of dating apps, but I kept using them because I did not know how else to meet people. That is how I matched with someone who called himself Landon. His profile was stunning. He was tall, fit, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. His bio said he was an engineer and a photographer, that he loved hiking, travel, and trying new restaurants. His photos showed him rock climbing, standing on mountain peaks, sitting in cafes in what looked like Paris or Barcelona. He seemed cultured, successful, adventurous, exactly the kind of person I wanted to meet. We started messaging, and the conversation was perfect. Not just good, perfect. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my hobbies, my goals. He remembered details from previous conversations and referenced them later. He sent me photos of sunsets he had photographed, shared playlists of music he thought I would like, recommended books and podcasts. We messaged for 5 days straight, hours every day, and by the end of it, I felt like I knew him. I felt like we had a real connection. So when he suggested we meet for drinks at a bar in Lincoln Park, I said yes. The bar was called The Hideout, a small place on North Damon Avenue with exposed brick walls and low lighting. We agreed to meet on Saturday, February 18th, 2023 at 7 in the evening. I arrived a few minutes early, nervous but excited. I sat at the bar and ordered a glass of wine while I waited. And then at 7:15, a man walked in and waved at me. My stomach dropped. He was not Landon. Not even close. The man waving at me was at least 15 years older than the person in the photos. He was shorter, maybe 5'6", with thinning gray hair and a belly that strained against his shirt. His face was weathered, lined, nothing like the sharp, handsome features I had seen in the profile. I stared at him, confused, thinking maybe he was waving at someone else, but he walked straight to me, smiled and said, "Alina, right? I am Landon." I did not know what to say. I just sat there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. This was not the person I had been talking to. This was not the person in the photos. This was a completely different person. He sat down next to me, ordered a beer, and started talking like nothing was wrong. He asked how my day was, complimented my outfit, said he was glad we finally got to meet. I said, "You do not look like your photos." He laughed. He said, "Yeah, those are a few years old. I have put on a little weight. But I am still the same person inside, right?" A few years old. He was lying. Those photos were not a few years old. They were not him at all. I later found out, through reverse image search, that the photos on his profile were stolen from a male model's Instagram account. This man, whoever he was, had created an entirely fake profile using someone else's photos, someone else's life, to trick women into meeting him, and now he was sitting next to me, acting like it was no big deal. I said I needed to use the restroom, and I got up from the bar. I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and tried to calm down. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend, told her what was happening, said I was going to leave. She texted back immediately, told me to get out of there, to tell him I was not feeling well, to just go. I took a deep breath, walked back out to the bar and said, "I am sorry, but I do not think this is going to work out. I am going to go." His expression changed instantly. The friendly smile disappeared. His face hardened, and he said, "What do you mean? We just got here." I said, "You lied about who you are. Your photos are fake. I am not comfortable staying." He leaned closer to me, his voice low and angry. He said, "You are being shallow. You matched with me because of how I looked, and now that I do not look exactly like my photos, you are bailing. That is pathetic. I said, "You catfished me. You lied. I am leaving." He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me from moving. He said, "Sit down. We are not done talking." I pulled my wrist away and said, "Do not touch me." People at the bar were starting to look. The bartender asked if everything was okay. I said yes, I was leaving. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door, and he followed me. He followed me out of the bar onto the street, yelling at me the whole time. He said I was a bitch, that I was judgmental, that I had wasted his time, that I was going to regret leaving him. He said he drove all the way out here to meet me, that the least I could do was give him a chance, that women like me were the reason men had to lie on dating apps. I kept walking faster and faster, trying to get away from him. But he kept following, getting closer, his voice getting louder. We were on a dark street now, away from the main road, away from the crowds. I was terrified. I pulled out my phone and said, "If you do not leave me alone, I am calling the police." He laughed. He said, "Go ahead, call them. Tell them what? That I followed you out of a bar. That is not a crime." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath, and he said, "You think you are too good for me, but you are not. You're just another stuck-up bitch who judges people on how they look." I started to dial 911, my hand shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons, and then, by some miracle, I saw headlights. A police car turned the corner, driving slowly down the street. I waved my arms, flagged them down, and the car stopped. 2 officers got out, asked what was going on. I said this man was following me, harassing me, that I wanted him to leave me alone. The man, the fake Landon, immediately changed his tone. He said, "Officer, this is just a misunderstanding. We were on a date and she got upset and I was just trying to talk to her." The officers looked at me, asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, I just wanted him to leave. They told him to go, said if he followed me again, he would be arrested. He glared at me, said, "You are going to regret this," and then walked away. The officers asked if I was okay, if I needed a ride home. I said no, I would call an Uber. They waited with me until the Uber arrived, and then I went home. I locked my door, closed all the blinds, and sat on my couch, shaking. I could not believe what had just happened. I could not believe what had just happened to something much worse. If that police car had not turned the corner at exactly the right moment, if those officers had not been there, I do not know what he would have done. I do not know if he would have followed me all the way home, if he would have attacked me, if I would have made it home at all. I reported his profile to the dating app the next day. I included screenshots of our conversations, a description of what happened, and the fact that his photos were fake. The app sent me an automated response saying they would investigate, but nothing happened. The profile stayed active. I checked it obsessively for weeks, watching to see if it would be taken down. It was not. It stayed up for months. And then, in July of 2023, 5 months after my date with the fake Landon, I was scrolling through the dating app and I saw him again. Same photos, same stolen images of the male model, but a different name. This time he was calling himself Ryan. Same bio, just slightly reworded. Same lies. I realized with horror that he was still doing this. He was still catfishing women, still tricking them into meeting him, still following them, still harassing them. How many women had he done this to? How many had met him and left, shaken and scared? How many had not been lucky enough to have a police car drive by at the right moment? I started researching catfishing, trying to understand why people do this, what drives them. And what I found was disturbing. Catfishing is not just about loneliness or insecurity. For some people, it is about power. It is about control. It is about enjoying the moment when the victim realizes they have been deceived, when they see the real person and feel betrayed, frightened, trapped. For people like the fake Landon, catfishing is not a means to an end. It is the end. The deception itself is the goal. The fear and discomfort of the victim is the reward. I learned about Austin Lee Edwards, a Virginia State Sheriff's deputy who catfished a 15-year-old girl online, posing as a 17-year-old boy. In November of 2022, he traveled to Riverside, California, murdered her mother, grandparents, and set their house on fire. He kidnapped the girl and was later killed in a shootout with police. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported a 97% increase in cases involving online enticement of children in 2020, and the numbers have continued to rise. I learned about Shimon Hayut, also known as the Tinder Swindler. He posed as a wealthy diamond mogul on Tinder, used fake photos and voice memos to trick women into believing he was in danger from diamond industry enemies, and con them out of millions of dollars. His story became a Netflix documentary in 2022, but he is still active on social media, still running scams, still using fake identities to deceive people. I learned about Liza Likens, a backup singer for Stevie Nicks who lost her husband to cancer in 2020. She joined Facebook dating, met a man calling himself Donald who said he lived in Australia, and over months of daily phone calls fell in love with him. He eventually started asking for money. She sent him over $1 million before she discovered he was a fraud. The photos he used were stolen from a German life coach named Raho Bornhorst, who says scammers have created over 100 fake profiles using his images. Bornhorst has spoken to dozens of women who were scammed using his photos, and he cannot get the fake profiles taken down. I learned about Kendra Lakari, a mother in Michigan who catfished her own daughter. She created fake profiles, pretended to be a teenage girl, and sent her daughter Lauren cruel text messages for months in 2021 and 2022. The messages said Lauren's boyfriend was cheating on her, called her ugly, used the nickname Lo that only family members used. The FBI traced the messages back to Kendra's phone. She was arrested in December of 2022 and sentenced to 19 months in prison in 2023. Her daughter, now an adult, has not spoken to her in over a year. The statistics on catfishing are staggering. According to the Federal Trade Commission, Americans lost $1.14 billion to romance scams in 2000 and 2003, more than double the $547 million lost in 2022. California led the nation with 2,024 victims, losing $100.6 million. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center reported that Americans aged 60 and over lost more than $356 million to confidence and romance scams in 2023 alone. But these numbers only represent reported cases. Experts estimate the true number is much higher because many victims are too embarrassed or ashamed to report being scammed. Social Catfish, a company that verifies online identities, releases an annual list of the 100 most catfished photos. These are images that have been stolen and used in romance scams thousands of times. Tristan King, a Marine veteran and mental health advocate, is one of the people whose photos have been misused since 2018. He says scammers now use AI technology to create deepfake videos, making it seem like they are video chatting with victims when they are not. He has had people contact him saying, "We chatted on video, do not you remember?" And he has to tell them, "No, that was not me, that was AI." Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, removed 1.4 billion fake accounts on Facebook between October and December of 2024 alone, up from 426 million in the first 3 months of 2023. Despite this, fake profiles continue to proliferate. A Norton survey from February of 2025 found that catfishing was declared the top dating scam, with 40% of people on dating apps saying they had been targeted by a scam, a 10% increase from 2024. The Department of Justice estimates there were 64,000 American victims of romance scams in 2023, but experts say this significantly underrepresents the true scope. Arun Rao, who oversees the Consumer Protection Branch at the Justice Department, says many victims are embarrassed, ashamed, or afraid to tell friends and family. He calls it a national crisis unfolding largely in secret. And it is not just financial scams. Catfishing is used to stalk, harass, intimidate, and assault victims. The person I met, the fake Landon, was not trying to scam me out of money. He was trying to control me, to frighten me, to punish me for rejecting him. He enjoyed the power he had over me in that moment. When I realized he was not who he said he was, when I tried to leave and he followed me. That was the point. That was what he wanted. I have thought a lot about that night, about what could have happened if the police car had not appeared, about what he would have done if we had been alone on that dark street with no witnesses, no help coming. I think about the other women he has done this to, the ones who matched with his rhyme profile, or whatever name he is using now. I think about whether any of them were hurt, whether any of them did not make it home. I reported his profile again under the new name. Nothing happened. I filed a police report, gave them all the information I had, including screenshots and dates. They said there was not much they could do unless he actually assaulted someone. Following someone and yelling at them is not technically a crime. Catfishing is not illegal. Using fake photos on the dating app is not illegal. There are no laws against it. The only time catfishing becomes a crime is when it is used in conjunction with fraud, identity theft, or physical assault. Until then, it is just considered deceptive, not criminal. I am sharing this story because I want women to know that catfishing is dangerous. It is not just about someone being insecure about their appearance. It is not just about someone using an old photo. It is about predators who use deception to lure victims, who enjoy the power dynamic of tricking someone, who get off on the fear and discomfort they cause. And the worst part is that the dating apps do not care. They do not verify identities. They do not do background checks. They do not take down fake profiles even when they are reported multiple times. They profit from every swipe, every match, every conversation, even if those conversations are between a real person and a predator using a fake profile. If you use dating apps, please do a reverse image search on anyone you match with before you meet them. Upload their photos to Google Images or use a site like Social Catfish. If the photos come back as stolen from someone else, block and report them immediately. If someone refuses to video chat before a meeting, that is a red flag. If someone avoids meeting in person for weeks or months, that is a red flag. If someone's story seems too good to be true, it probably is. And if you show up to a date and the person looks nothing like their photos, leave. Do not give them a chance to explain. Do not worry about being rude. Do not let them guilt you into staying. Just leave. Go to a public place, tell someone what happened, make sure you were safe. Because the person who lied about their photos is also lying about who they are, and you do not know what else they are capable of. I am 26 years old. I do not use dating apps anymore. I do not trust online profiles. I do not believe anything anyone says until I have met them in person, in a public place, with people around. I am careful, maybe overly careful, but I am alive, and I am sharing this story because I want other women to be careful too. I want them to be safe. I want them to know that the person in the photos might not be the person who shows up, and when that happens they need to run. The fake Landon is still out there, still using stolen photos, still catfishing women, still following them, harassing them, terrifying them, and the dating apps are letting him. They are giving him a platform, allowing him to create profile after profile, to target woman after woman, and they will keep doing it until someone makes them stop, until there are laws that hold them accountable, until they care more about safety than profit. I survived because a police car happened to turn the corner at the right moment. One moment of luck. That is all that saved me. Do not count on being that lucky. Be smart. Be careful. And if the person in the photos is not the person at the bar, leave. Because staying could cost you your life. What I saw in the Shoshone National Forest, Wyoming, in February of 2023, I will tell you that today. I have debated whether to share this publicly for almost 2 years now. I have spoken to psychiatrists, to investigators, to other park rangers who have worked the backcountry for decades. And everyone I have talked to has the same reaction. They listen quietly. They ask questions, and then they tell me there must be a rational explanation. But there is not. I know what I saw. I know what happened. And I know that according to every record, every database, every piece of documentation maintained by the United States Forest Service and National Park Service, what I encountered should not exist. My name is Michael Brennan, and I am a search and rescue coordinator for the Forest Service in Wyoming. I have worked in wilderness management for 14 years. I have recovered bodies from avalanches, pulled injured climbers off cliff faces, and tracked lost hikers through blizzards. I am not prone to panic. I am not superstitious. I understand how the mind can play tricks in extreme conditions, how hypothermia affects cognition, how exhaustion can create hallucinations. What happened to me was none of those things. In February of 2023, a 32-year-old woman named Sarah Hartley went missing during a solo winter camping trip in a remote section of the Shoshone National Forest. Her vehicle was found at a trailhead parking area, her permit properly filed, her emergency contacts notified of her intended route. When she failed to return after 4 days, her family contacted authorities and a search operation was initiated. I was assigned as lead coordinator. The terrain was brutal. 3 feet of fresh snow had fallen the week before. Temperatures were dropping to -15 degrees Fahrenheit at night, and the forecast predicted another storm within 48 hours. We had a narrow window to find her. Our team consisted of 8 people, including myself, 2 tracking dogs, and a helicopter on standby for the first clear weather. We began our search at first light, spreading out in a grid pattern from her last known location based on the route she had filed in her permit. By midday, we had found nothing. No tracks, no equipment, no sign she had even entered the forest. The dogs were behaving strangely, refusing to move forward on certain trails, whining and pulling back toward the vehicles. This is unusual behavior for trained search animals. They are selected specifically for their focus and reliability in difficult conditions. According to data from the National Park Service, there are over 1,600 documented missing persons cases in national parks and forests that remain unsolved. Author David Paralides, a former police detective, has spent years documenting cases he calls Missing 411, incidents where people vanish under unusual circumstances in wilderness areas. Common factors include bad weather immediately after disappearance, search dogs being unable to pick up a scent, and victims being found miles from where they should have been, often in areas that were previously searched. Sarah Hartley was becoming another statistic in a pattern no one can fully explain. As the sun began to drop toward the horizon, I made the decision to push deeper into the backcountry with 2 other team members, Jackson Hayes and Lisa Chen. The rest of the team would maintain base camp and continue searching the primary grid. We would check a secondary area, a valley system about 6 miles from the trailhead that was not on Sarah's planned route, but was accessible as she'd gotten disoriented. We hiked for 2 hours, our headlamps cutting cones of light through the early twilight. The forest was absolutely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, just the crunch of our boots in the snow and our own breathing. That is when I saw him. There was a man standing approximately 200 yards ahead of us on the trail. He was wearing a Forest Service uniform, the standard green jacket and gray pants, the official National Park Service arrowhead patch, visible on his shoulder even at that distance. He was not moving, just standing there in the middle of the trail, facing us. I called out to him, "Hey, are you part of the search team?" No response. He did not move, did not turn his head, just stood there, perfectly still, like a mannequin placed in the forest. Jackson said quietly, "Who the hell is that? We are the only ones assigned to this sector." I radioed back to base camp. "This is Brennan. We have visual on an individual in Sector 7. Male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing Forest Service uniform. Can you confirm if anyone else is operating in this area?" The radio crackled. Base camp coordinator responded, "Negative, Brennan. You 3 are the only personnel in Sector 7. Repeat, you are the only personnel in that area." I looked back at the figure on the trail. He still had not moved, not a single muscle. The way he was standing was wrong, completely rigid, no shifting of weight, no natural body movement. Human beings do not stand that still. Lisa said. This is really weird. Should we approach him? I have trained for hundreds of scenarios in wilderness rescue. Lost hikers, injured climbers, dangerous wildlife, hostile individuals. But nothing in my training prepared me for what to do when you encounter someone who should not be there, wearing a uniform they should not have, standing in a way that human bodies do not stand. I made a decision. We would approach slowly, maintain distance, and assess the situation. If this person needed help, we would provide it. If this person was a threat, we would retreat to base camp and call for backup. We moved forward. 50 yards, 40 yards, 30 yards. The figure still did not move. At 20 yards, I could see details. The uniform looked old. Not vintage, not retro. Old. The fabric had a faded quality to it. The patches were positioned slightly differently than current regulation. The hat was a style the Forest Service had not used since the 1970s. At 15 yards, I could see his face, and that is when the situation became something else entirely. Something I still cannot rationalize. His face was wrong. Not disfigured, not injured, just wrong. The features were too symmetrical, too smooth, like someone had drawn a human face from memory but had never actually seen one. His eyes were open, but they were not focused on us. They were looking straight ahead, staring at nothing, unblinking. Jackson stopped walking. Mike, we need to leave, right now. I said, identify yourself. Are you a Forest Service employee? The figure did not respond. But something changed. His mouth opened slightly as if he was about to speak. And then I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Laughter. A child's laughter. High, clear, and completely out of place in the frozen silence of the forest. But it was not coming from the man. It was coming from behind us. I spun around. There, about 30 feet back on the trail we had just walked, was a small figure. A child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a thin summer dress despite the sub-zero temperature. She was smiling at us. Lisa grabbed my arm. Mike, that's Sarah Hartley. Look at her face. She was right. The child's face was identical to Sarah Hartley's driver's license photo. Same bone structure, same eyes, same mouth. But it was a child. Sarah Hartley was a 32-year-old woman. The girl spoke. Her voice was cheerful, sing-song, completely innocent. Do you want to play with us? We have been waiting for you. I looked back at the man in the Forest Service uniform. He had not moved, but his eyes were now looking directly at me, and they were completely black. Not dark brown, not shadowed. Black, like looking into empty space. Jackson whispered, we need to run. In cases of missing 411 disappearances, survivors who were found alive often report strange encounters, people they met in the forest who should not have been there, figures that appeared and disappeared, voices that called to them from the trees. Many of these survivors are found in areas that have been thoroughly searched multiple times, appearing in locations where they should not have been able to reach. I made the only decision that made sense. Back to base camp, now. Do not look at them, do not respond, just move. We turned and started walking quickly back the way we had come. Behind us, I heard the little girl's voice again. Please do not leave. We have been so lonely out here. We just want someone to stay with us, forever. I did not look back. We walked for 10 minutes, then 15. The forest around us felt different. The trees seemed closer together than they had been before. The trail seemed narrower. I checked my Japsiops. According to the coordinates, we were moving in the right direction, but the distance was not decreasing. We should have covered half a mile. The GAP showed we had moved less than 50 yards. Lisa said, this is not right. We should have reached the valley fork by now. I stopped and turned around. The trail behind us was empty. No child. No man in the Forest Service uniform. Just snow and trees and gathering darkness. But our footprints were gone. The trail behind us was smooth, unbroken snow, as if we had never walked that way at all. Jackson said, "Where are our tracks?" I have no answer for that. We had just walked that trail. Our boots should have left clear prints in the fresh snow. But there was nothing. The snow was pristine. And then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Ahead of us on the trail, maybe 50 feet away, were footprints. Small footprints. A child's footprints, leading in the direction we were walking. The little girl was ahead of us now, not behind us. Ahead of us. How did she get there? We had not passed her. She had not passed us, but there she was, standing in the middle of the trail again, smiling. She said, "You are going the wrong way. The woman you are looking for is this way." She pointed deeper into the forest, away from base camp, away from the trail, into the dense trees where no sane person would go in these conditions. I said, "Where is Sarah Hartley?" The child tilted her head. "She is with the others. They are all waiting. They have been waiting for a long time. Some of them have been waiting for years." In 1980, a Forest Service ranger named Paul Braxton Fugate went for a hike in Chiricahua National Monument in Arizona and never returned. Despite extensive searches, no trace of him was ever found. The case remains open. There are dozens of similar cases. Rangers, hikers, experienced outdoors people who simply vanished in areas they knew well, under conditions that should not have allowed them to get lost. I pulled out my radio. "Base camp, this is Brennan. We have encountered an unidentified individual, possibly a minor in Sector 7, requesting immediate backup and medical evacuation. Possible hypothermia victim. Static. No response." I tried again. "Base camp, do you copy?" Nothing. The radio was dead. I checked the battery. Full charge. I checked the frequency. Correct. The radio should have been working, but it was silent. Jackson said, "Mike, we need to leave. I do not care about protocol. I do not care about the search. We need to get out of this forest right now." He was right. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But we were lost. Our GPS was malfunctioning. Our radio was dead, and there was a child standing in front of us who looked exactly like the missing woman we were searching for. I made a decision that I still question. I said, "Where is Sarah Hartley? If you know where she is, show us." The child smiled wider. "Follow me." She turned and walked into the trees. And against every rational thought in my head, we followed her. We walked for what felt like hours. The child moved quickly despite the deep snow, her bare feet leaving small prints that we struggled to follow. The forest around us became darker, denser. The temperature dropped. I could feel the cold seeping through my layers, but I could not stop. Something was compelling me forward. Lisa whispered, "Mike, this is wrong. We need to go back." But I could not. I physically could not turn around. It was like my body was on autopilot, following the child deeper and deeper into the wilderness. And then we entered a clearing, and I saw something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. There were people standing in the clearing, dozens of them. Men, women, children, all dressed in clothing from different eras. Some wore modern hiking gear. Some wore clothes from the 80s, the 70s, even earlier. They were all standing perfectly still, arranged in a rough circle around the edge of the clearing. In the center of the clearing was Sarah Hartley. She was sitting in the snow, her back against a tree, her eyes open but unfocused. She was alive. Her chest was moving, but she was not responding to anything around her. The little girl walked to the center of the clearing and stood next to Sarah. She looked back at us and said she wanted to be alone. So we gave her what she wanted. Complete solitude. Forever. One of the figures in the circle stepped forward. It was the man in the Forest Service uniform, his black eyes fixed on me. When he spoke, his voice sounded like static, like a radio struggling to find a signal. You should not have come here. This place is not for the living. Jackson turned and ran. He made it about 10 feet before he stopped, frozen mid-step, not moving, not breathing, like someone had hit pause on a video. Lisa screamed and tried to run in the opposite direction. The same thing happened. She froze mid-stride, one foot still in the air, suspended in place. I could not move. My body would not respond to any command I gave it. I was rooted to the spot, watching as the figures in the circle began to slowly close in. The child spoke again. You can join us, or you can leave. But if you leave, you cannot tell anyone what you saw. You cannot bring anyone back here. Do you understand? I do not know how I managed to speak. My throat felt paralyzed, but somehow I forced the words out. I understand. The child smiled. Good. Then you may go. But remember, we are always watching. We know when people come into our forest, and we always find them. Suddenly I could move again. Jackson and Lisa were beside me, both gasping for air like they had been held underwater. We ran. We ran harder than I have ever run in my life. We did not look back. We did not stop until we reached base camp 2 hours later, our lungs burning, our legs screaming. The search for Sarah Hartley was suspended the next day due to weather. When the team went back out a week later, they found her body 3 miles from where she was supposed to be, in an area that had been searched multiple times. The official cause of death was exposure. The medical examiner noted that her body was in an unusual state of preservation, given the weather conditions, almost as if she had died only hours before she was found, not days. I filed a report describing our encounter. I was honest about what we saw. The investigation was brief. I was placed on administrative leave for psychological evaluation. The psychiatrist determined I had experienced a stress-induced hallucination brought on by extreme conditions and the pressure of the search operation. Jackson and Lisa gave similar accounts in their reports. They were also placed on leave. 3 months later, I was cleared to return to work. But I have not gone back to the Shoshone National Forest. I have requested transfer to a different region. I will not set foot in that forest again. Because I know what I saw. I know that somewhere in those woods, there are people who should not exist. People who have been missing for years, decades, maybe longer, standing in a clearing, waiting. And I know that little girl is still there, still smiling, still asking people if they want to play. The National Park Service does not maintain a centralized database of missing persons cases. There is no standardized tracking system. Families have petitioned for transparency, for a comprehensive list of everyone who has vanished in our national forests and parks. Those petitions have been denied. I think about Sarah Hartley often. I think about the expression on her face when we found her in that clearing. She looked peaceful, almost content, like she had finally found what she was looking for. Complete solitude, complete silence. But I also think about all those other figures standing in the circle, all those people who have been reported missing over the years, all those cases that remain unsolved, and I wonder how many more are still out there. How many more are waiting in clearings we will never find? How many more children in summer dresses are leading searchers deeper and deeper into the woods? I do not hike alone anymore. I do not venture into backcountry wilderness without backup, and I do not respond to voices calling from the trees. Because I know now that not everything in the forest is what it appears to be, and some invitations should never be accepted. If you are planning to hike in a remote wilderness area, please file a detailed trip plan with someone you trust. Carry emergency communication devices. Stay on marked trails, and if you encounter someone in the forest who seems out of place, someone who does not quite look right, someone who invites you to follow them deeper into the woods, do not go. Turn around, get back to civilization, and do not look back, because some of us who walk into those forests never come back out, and the ones who do are never quite the same. I want to make something very clear before I tell you this story. I survived because of luck, not because I was smart or brave or prepared. Just luck. One red light. One unlocked car door. One split-second decision. That is all that saved my life. And I am telling you this story because I want you to understand that dating apps are not safe. They are hunting grounds, and the monsters using them know exactly what they are doing. My name is Rowan, and I am 29 years old. 3 years ago, in January of 2022, I was living in Anchorage, Alaska, working as a software developer for an oil company. I had moved to Alaska from Seattle 6 months earlier for the job, and I did not know anyone. The isolation was crushing. Anchorage is dark for most of the winter, with only a few hours of dim daylight, and the cold makes it hard to go out and meet people. I spend most of my time alone in my apartment, working remotely, ordering food delivery, watching the snow pile up outside my window. I was lonely, desperately lonely. So, I downloaded dating apps. Tinder, Hinge, Bumble. I swiped through profiles every night, hoping to find someone to talk to, someone to connect with, someone to make this frozen city feel less empty. That is how I met Aura. She messaged me on Hinge in mid-January. Her profile seemed normal. She was 27, worked in marketing, had photos of herself hiking at coffee shops with friends. She was pretty, with long dark hair and a warm smile. Her bio said she loved the outdoors, trying new restaurants and meeting new people. We started chatting, and she seemed genuine, not overly flirtatious, not pushing to meet right away, just friendly and easy to talk to. We messaged for about a week, talking about work, about Alaska, about how hard it was to adjust to the winter darkness. She said she had been in Anchorage for 3 years and still was not used to it. She said the key was to force yourself to go out, to find places to socialize, to not let the isolation win. I appreciated the advice. She felt like someone who understood. After a week of messaging, she suggested we meet up. She said there was a quiet pub downtown that she liked, a place with good food and a relaxed atmosphere. She said it was a good spot for a first date because it was public, but not too loud. I agreed. We set a date for Saturday, January 22nd, 2022, at 7 in the evening. I was nervous but excited. I had not been on a date in months, and I was looking forward to meeting someone in person, to having a conversation face to face instead of through a screen. The day before the date, Aura messaged me and asked if it would be okay if her cousin joined us for a little while at the beginning of the date. She said her cousin Hale was visiting from out of town, and she had promised to spend some time with him. But she did not want to cancel our date. She said he would only stay for one drink. Then he would leave, and we could have the rest of the evening to ourselves. It seemed a little odd, but not a huge red flag. People have family obligations. I said sure, that was fine. I figured it might even make the beginning of the date less awkward, having a third person there to take some of the pressure off. The pub was called the Northern Light, a small place on 4th Avenue with dark wood paneling and dim lighting. I arrived a few minutes early and waited outside, watching the snow fall under the streetlights. Era arrived right on time, bundled up in a heavy winter coat, smiling. She looked just like her photos. We hugged briefly, and she apologized again for bringing her cousin. Said she appreciated me being so understanding. A few minutes later, a large SUV pulled up, and a man got out. Era introduced him as Hale. He was tall, maybe 6'4", broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a blank expression. He nodded at me, but Did not smile, did not shake my hand, just stood there staring. I felt immediately uncomfortable. There was something off about him, something cold. We went inside and sat at a table in the corner. Ara was chatty, asking me about my job, my apartment, what I thought of Anchorage so far. Hale sat next to her, silent, drinking a beer, watching me. He did not contribute to the conversation at all. He just sat there, staring. It was unnerving. I tried to include him, asked him where he was visiting from, but he just grunted and said, "Seattle." That was it. One word. And then back to staring. Era laughed it off, said Hale was shy, that he did not talk much around new people. But it did not feel like shyness. It felt like he was sizing me up, evaluating me. Like a predator watching prey. We ordered food and drinks. I had 2 beers over the course of an hour, and Ara had a glass of wine. Hale drank steadily, finishing 3 beers without saying more than a few words. The conversation was awkward because of his presence, but Ara kept it going, asking me questions, laughing at my jokes, seeming interested. I started to relax a little. Maybe Hale was just awkward. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Around 8:30, Ara suggested we each have one more drink before calling it a night. She said Hale needed to head back to his hotel soon anyway, so it would just be one more round and then he would leave. I agreed. The bartender brought over another beer for me, a whiskey for Ara, and another beer for Hale. I took a sip of my beer. It tasted slightly off, bitter in a way that was different from the other 2 I had drunk. I thought maybe it was a different brand, or maybe the tap line needed cleaning. I took another sip, and then another, and within 5 minutes I started to feel strange. My vision blurred. The room started to tilt. I felt dizzy, nauseous, like I was going to pass out. I tried to say something to Ara, but my words came out slurred. She looked at me with what I thought was concern, but now I realize it was satisfaction. She said, "Oh, you do not look good. Maybe you drank too fast. You should get some air." Hale stood up and grabbed my arm, said he would help me outside. I tried to pull away, but I could not. My body was not responding. I could barely stand. He half carried me out of the pub with Aura following close behind. I have fragmented memories of what happened next. Being put in the back seat of the SUV, Aura saying something about taking me home, asking for my address, me trying to give it to them, but not being able to speak clearly, and then nothing. Blackness. I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the back of the moving SUV. My hands were zip-tied behind my back. There was duct tape over my mouth. My head was pounding, and I felt like I was going to vomit. I could hear Ara and Hale in the front seats arguing in low voices. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to still be unconscious, trying to listen. Ara was saying something about a promise, about how they needed me, about how this was the last one and then they could pay off what they owed. Hale was saying something about making sure I did not wake up too soon, about needing to get farther out of the city before I came to. I felt terror unlike anything I had ever experienced. I realized with horrible clarity that I had been drugged and kidnapped, that these people were not taking me home, that they had a plan for me, and it was not good. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my breathing steady, to pretend I was still unconscious. I needed to think. I needed to figure out how to get out of this. My hands were zip-tied, but they were in front of my body, not behind. I could feel the zip tie cutting into my wrists. My feet were not tied. If I could get the car door open, if I could get out, I might have a chance. I waited. I listened. The SUV was moving through the city, stopping and starting at traffic lights. I could feel the turns, the stops, the acceleration. I needed to time this right. If I tried to escape while the car was moving fast, I would be killed. But if I waited for a red light, if the car was stopped, I might be able to throw myself out and run. After what felt like an eternity, I felt the SUV slow down and come to a stop. A red light. I could hear the engine idling. I could hear Aura and Hale still talking in the front. This was my chance. I opened my eyes just enough to see the door handle. I twisted my body, brought my zip-tied hands up to the handle, and pulled. The door was unlocked. Thank God it was unlocked. I threw my weight against the door and tumbled out into the street. I landed hard on the icy pavement, my shoulder hitting first, pain shooting through my body. But I did not stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I heard Era scream. I heard Hale shouting. I heard the SUV door open. But I did not look back. I just ran. I ran as fast as I could, my hands still zip-tied in front of me, duct tape still over my mouth, running through the snow in the dark, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I had to get away. I ran for maybe 2 blocks before I saw headlights. A car was coming toward me. I ran into the middle of the street, waving my arms, trying to flag it down. The car stopped. The driver, an older woman, rolled down her window and gasped when she saw me. I ripped the duct tape off my mouth and screamed for help. She got out of her car, pulled out her phone, and called 911. She helped me into her car, locked the doors, and waited with me until the police arrived. The police took me to the hospital. They cut off the zip ties, checked me for injuries, took blood samples to test for what I had been drugged with. The toxicology report came back positive for GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, a date rape drug that causes drowsiness, memory loss, and unconsciousness. The doctor said I was lucky I had not been given a higher dose, that it could have killed me or caused permanent brain damage. They kept me overnight for observation, and detectives came to take my statement. I told them everything. The dating app, the messages, the date, the pub, the drug drink, the kidnapping, the escape. I described Aura and Hale in as much detail as I could remember. I gave them screenshots of our Hinge conversations. The detectives took notes, asked follow-up questions, and then told me something that made my blood run cold. They said I was not the first. They said there had been other reports of people, mostly men, being drugged and robbed after meeting women on dating apps in Anchorage. But those victims had only lost their wallets, phones, and credit cards. They had woken up in alleys or parking lots, dazed and confused, with no memory of what happened. I was the first person who remembered being kidnapped, the first person who escaped before whatever they had planned could happen. The police investigated. They pulled security footage from the Northern Light pub and saw Aura, Hale, and me. They identified the bartender who served us and questioned him. He said he remembered Aura coming to the bar alone and ordering the 3rd round of drinks, that she had waited at the bar for a few minutes while he prepared them, that she could have easily slipped something into my beer when he was not looking. The police ran the license plate from the SUV that several witnesses saw parked outside the pub and tracked it to a rental car company. The SUV had been rented by a woman using a fake ID and a stolen credit card. The detectives said Aura and Hale were likely not their real names. They said this was a pattern, a scam that had been run multiple times. They said the suspects were probably part of a larger operation, a ring that targeted lonely, isolated people on dating apps, drugged them, kidnapped them, and either robbed them or worse. They said human trafficking, organ harvesting, and ransom were all possibilities for what might have happened to me if I had not escaped. They said I was incredibly lucky. But they never caught them. Aura and Hale disappeared. The Hinge account was deleted. The phone number Aura had given me was a burner that was no longer in service. The SUV was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot, wiped clean of fingerprints. The detectives said they would keep investigating, but without more leads, there was not much they could do. I was told to be careful, to vary my routine, to watch for anyone following me. I was told that Aura and Hale might come back for me, to finish what they started or to silence me as a witness. I moved out of Anchorage 2 months later. I could not stay there. Every time I went outside, I felt like I was being watched. Every time I saw a dark SUV, my heart raced. I had nightmares about being back in that car, zip-tied and duct-taped, hearing Aura and Hale arguing about what to do with me. I developed PTSD, anxiety, insomnia. I could not go on dates. I could not trust anyone. I deleted all my dating apps and vowed never to use them again. Since then, I have researched dating app crimes extensively. I needed to understand what happened to me, needed to know if it was rare or if this was a widespread problem. And what I found horrified me. Dating app-related crimes are skyrocketing, and the companies running these apps are not doing enough to stop it. I learned about Dr. Stephen Matthews from Denver. He was a cardiologist who used Hinge and Tinder to meet women between 2019 and 2023. He would invite them to his house, drug their drinks, and rape them. At least 15 women reported being drugged and assaulted by him. He was first reported to Hinge on September 28, 2020. But Match Group, the company that owns Hinge, did nothing. They allowed him to stay on the app. They even promoted his profile as a standout, a featured profile that the algorithm recommends to users. Women kept matching with him, kept going to his house, kept being drugged and raped. It was not until January of 2023, when one survivor went to the police, that he was finally arrested. By then, he had assaulted at least 11 women. In October of 2024, he was sentenced to 158 years to life in prison. According to the Dating Apps Reporting Project, Match Group has known since at least 2016 which users have been reported for drugging, assaulting, or raping their dates. Since 2019, their central database, called Sentinel, has recorded every user reported for rape and assault across their entire suite of apps. By 2022, Sentinel was collecting hundreds of troubling incidents every week. But Match Group kept this information secret. They promised to publish a transparency report in 2022, but never did. After the investigation was published, mentions of the transparency report were quietly removed from their website. I learned about Aurora Phelps from Las Vegas. She is accused of befriending older men she met in person or online, drugging them, and gaining access to their bank accounts. She is linked to at least 2 deaths and 1 disappearance. In 2022, she allegedly met an elderly man online, drugged him at a Las Vegas restaurant, influenced him to fly with her to Mexico City, and used his credit cards to rent a hotel room. Several days later, she returned to the U.S. alone. The man was found dead in the hotel. She is also accused of meeting another man on a date in Guadalajara, Mexico, on May 30, 2022. He was found dead on his bathroom floor the next day. She allegedly stole from his accounts and used one to buy a gold coin that she mailed to her house. She was arrested in Mexico in September of 2023 and is facing charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and kidnapping. I learned about research from Brigham Young University published in 2022. They analyzed hundreds of sexual assaults in Utah and found that attacks facilitated by dating apps happened faster and were more violent than when the perpetrator met the victim through other means. They also found that perpetrators who use dating apps are more likely to target vulnerable people. Almost 60% of sexual assault survivors self-reported a mental illness. The research suggests that dating apps give predators easy access to vulnerable targets, allow them to screen for isolation and desperation, and provide a veneer of legitimacy that makes victims more likely to trust them. The statistics are staggering. According to studies, 1 in 10 online dating profiles are fake or created for malicious purposes. Between 2011 and 2016, reports of sexual assault linked to online dating increased by 450% in the UK. In the US, cases of rape, assault, murder, robbery, and kidnapping connected to dating apps have been rising steadily. Women aged 18 to 24 are at highest risk. But men are also targeted, especially for robbery and financial scams. And these are just the reported cases. Many more go unreported because victims are ashamed, scared, or do not think anyone will believe them. Match Group, which owns Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, and dozens of other dating apps, operates in more than 40 languages and 190 countries. It is an $8 billion company. It has the resources to implement better safety measures, but it chooses not to, because safety measures are bad for business. Background checks, verification systems, better reporting mechanisms, all of these would slow down the user experience, make it harder to match quickly, reduce engagement, and reduced engagement means less profit. In 2023, Match Group partnered with Garbo, a background check company that allowed users to search for records of violence or abuse before meeting someone. But the partnership fell apart in the summer of 2023. Garbo wrote in a blog post, "It has become clear that most online platforms are not legitimately committed to trust and safety for their users." The message was clear. Match Group cares more about profit than protecting its users. I am sharing this story because I want people to understand that dating apps are dangerous. They are not just a way to meet people. They are tools that predators use to find victims. And the companies running these apps know this and do nothing to stop it. I want people to know that if you use dating apps, you are taking a risk, a serious risk. You are trusting that the person on the other side of the screen is who they say they are, that they have good intentions, that they will not hurt you, but you have no way of knowing if that is true. The profile photos could be fake. The bio could be a lie. The messages could be part of a carefully crafted script designed to make you trust them, to make you let your guard down, to make you an easy target. I want people to know the warning signs. If someone suggests meeting somewhere isolated for a first date, that is a red flag. If someone wants to bring a friend or family member on a first date, that is a red flag. If someone pushes you to drink more than you are comfortable with, that is a red flag. If your drink tastes off, stop drinking it immediately. If you start to feel dizzy, nauseous, or confused after drinking something, get help right away. Do not let anyone take you somewhere alone. Do not get in their car. Do not go to their house. Stay in public. Tell someone where you are going. Check in with a friend. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I also want to say this. If you have been assaulted, drugged, robbed, or harmed by someone you met on a dating app, it is not your fault. You did not deserve it. You were targeted by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, who planned it, who chose you because they thought they could get away with it. Report it. Go to the police. Go to the hospital. Did a toxicology test if you think you were drugged. Document everything. And report the person's profile to the dating app. Even though the app will probably do nothing, at least there will be a record. I survived because of one red light. One unlocked door. One moment of clarity when I realized I had to act or die. Not everyone is that lucky. There are people who get into cars with dating app matches and never come home. There are bodies found in rivers, in forests, in shallow graves, victims of people they met online who seemed safe but were monsters. There are people who wake up in hospitals with no memory of what happened. Their bank accounts emptied, their identities stolen. There are people who are never found at all, who disappear without a trace, whose families spend the rest of their lives wondering what happened. I am 29 years old. I live in Portland now, far from Alaska, far from that frozen city where I almost died. I have a good job, a nice apartment, a few close friends. I am in therapy, working through the trauma, learning to trust again. But I will never use a dating app again. I will never meet someone online and agree to go somewhere with them. The risk is too high. The cost is too great. To Ara and Hale, wherever you are, I hope you get caught. I hope you face justice for what you did to me and to however many others came before and after. I hope you are stopped before you kill someone, if you have not already. And I hope anyone reading this understands what you are. You are not just scammers or thieves. You are predators, hunters, and you almost killed me. To anyone using dating apps, please be careful. Meet in public. Tell someone where you are going. Do not drink anything you did not see poured. Do not let anyone pressure you into doing something that makes you uncomfortable. Trust your instincts. And remember that the person on the other side of the screen might not be who they seem. They might be someone like Ara and Hale, someone who sees you not as a person but as a target, someone who will drug you, kidnap you, and do God knows what if you do not escape. I survived, but I was lucky. One red light. That is all it took. One red light at exactly the right moment. Do not count on being that lucky. Be smart. Be careful. Be safe. Schedule. And if your drink tastes off, stop drinking it. Run. Because the next sip might be your last. Trust your instincts, even when everything seems normal. Even when someone seems charming and kind. Even when you feel like you are overreacting. Trust that voice in your head that says something is wrong, because that voice exists for a reason. It exists to keep you alive. My name is Avery, and I am 20 years old. 2 years ago, when I was 18 and fresh out of high school, I was living in a small town in Kansas called Hoisington, about 2 hours west of Wichita. There was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where there was not much to do except hang out at the Dairy Queen or drive around on country roads. Most of my friends had left for college, but I had stayed behind to work and save money. I was living with my parents, working at a grocery store, and spending my free time on dating apps because I was lonely and bored. That is how I met Troy. He messaged me on a dating app in late December of 2022, right before Christmas. His profile seemed normal. He was 24, worked in construction, had photos of himself at the lake with friends, sitting on a truck tailgate, holding up fish he had caught. He was not bad looking, tall with brown hair and a nice smile. His bio said he liked hunting, fishing, and spending time with family. He seemed like a typical small-town Kansas guy. Safe. Normal. The kind of person you could bring home to meet your parents. We talked for about a week before he asked me to meet up. Our conversations were fine. Not particularly deep or interesting, but not creepy either. He asked about my job, my hobbies, what I wanted to do with my life. I told him I was saving money to go to college, that I wanted to study nursing. He said that was cool, that his mom had been a nurse. He seemed nice, normal. So when he asked if I wanted to come over to his place for pizza and a movie, I said yes. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking I was stupid for agreeing to go to a stranger's house for a first date. And you are right. It was stupid. But I was 18, lonely, and naive. I thought because we had been talking for a week, because his profile seemed normal, because this was a small town where everyone knew everyone, it would be safe. I thought the biggest risk was that he might be boring or awkward, not that he might be dangerous. I was wrong. The date was planned for December 28, 2022. It had snowed the night before, and the roads were icy. But I drove to his address anyway. He lived on the outskirts of town, in a small house on a dirt road surrounded by fields. It was isolated, but in rural Kansas that is normal. Most people do not live in neighborhoods. They live on acreage, spread out, with their nearest neighbor half a mile away. So, the location did not seem weird to me. I parked in front of the house and walked up to the door. Troy answered right away, smiling, welcoming me in. The house was warm, heated by a wood stove in the living room. It smelled like pizza, and there was a movie already queued up on the TV. He introduced me to his cousin, a guy about his age named Jake, who was sitting on the couch drinking a beer. Troy said Jake lived with him, that they worked construction together. Jake nodded at me, said hi, and then got up and said he was going downstairs to play video games so we could have privacy. He went through a door near the kitchen and disappeared down a staircase. Troy and I sat on the couch and ate pizza. The movie was some action movie I do not remember the name of. We talked a little, but mostly we just watched the movie. He was sitting close to me, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt a little uncomfortable, but not alarmed. This was a first date. Some physical contact was normal, even expected. After the movie ended, we started kissing, and then things progressed from there. We moved to his bedroom, and we were intimate. It was consensual. I want to be clear about that. I was not forced. I made a choice to be intimate with him, and at the time I thought it was fine. He seemed nice. The situation seemed normal. But then, after we were done, as I was getting dressed, I heard it. A scream. Not a scream from a movie or a video game. A real scream. A human scream. Raw, pained, filled with terror. It came from the basement, directly below us. And it was not just one scream. It was multiple screams, punctuated by sobbing, by a voice begging, "Please, please stop, I will do anything, please." I froze. My blood went cold. I looked at Troy, and he looked annoyed, like this was an inconvenience. He said, "Oh, that is just my cousin watching a horror movie downstairs. He gets really into it." Turns the volume up loud. I stared at him. I said that did not sound like a movie. That sounded real. He laughed, said I was being paranoid, that it was definitely a movie, that Jake always watched scary stuff with the volume cranked up. He said, "Do not worry about it, do you want to watch another movie?" But I could not stop listening. The screaming continued, and the more I listened, the more certain I became that it was not a movie. It was too raw, too visceral. Movie screams sound manufactured, performed. This sounded real, like someone was being hurt, tortured, begging for mercy. I felt panic rising in my chest. I said I needed to go, that I had just remembered I promised my mom I would be home by a certain time. Troy looked disappointed. He said, "Really? You are leaving already?" I said, "Yes. I'm sorry. I have to go." He walked me to the door, tried to kiss me goodbye, but I pulled away. I got in my car and drove as fast as I could on those icy roads, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. When I got home, I tried to convince myself I had overreacted. Maybe it was a movie. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I could not shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. I texted Troy that night, said I had a good time, but I did not think we were a match. He did not respond. I deleted his number and tried to forget about the whole thing. 2 days later, on December 30th, 2022, I was at work when my coworker showed me her phone. She said, "Oh my God, Avery, is not this the guy you went on a date with?" I looked at the screen. It was a news article. The headline said, "2 men arrested for kidnapping and torture." And there in the photos were Troy and Jake. According to the article, Troy and Jake had been arrested for kidnapping and torturing Jake's stepfather. They had been holding him captive in the basement of Troy's house for over 3 weeks. The victim, a man in his 50s, had been chained to a wall, beaten, burned with cigarettes, starved, and subjected to prolonged psychological torture. Neighbors had reported hearing strange noises coming from the house, but they thought it was just the guys working on something or watching loud movies. The victim had finally been discovered when a relative who had not heard from him in weeks called the police to do a welfare check. When officers arrived at the house, they heard screaming from the basement and forced entry. They found the victim barely alive, covered in bruises and burns, severely malnourished, and suffering from multiple broken bones. I read the article 3 times before it sank in. The scream I heard, the scream Troy said was a horror movie. It was not a movie. It was a real person, a real victim, being tortured in the basement while I was upstairs, 20 feet away, in bed with his captor. I felt like I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. And then I started shaking so hard I could not stand. My manager found me on the floor, crying, and called my parents. They came and took me home. The police contacted me the next day. They wanted a statement. I told them everything. I told them about the dating app, the messages, the date, the scream I heard. They asked why I did not call 911 when I heard the scream. I said I did not know. I said Troy convinced me it was a movie. I said I just wanted to leave, that I was scared, that I did not think clearly. The officer said it was okay, that I was not in trouble, that I had done the right thing by coming forward now, but I felt guilty. I felt like if I had called the police that night, maybe the victim would not have suffered for 2 more days. Maybe I could have saved him sooner. The officer told me I was lucky. He said Troy and Jake had not hurt me because they believed my excuse for leaving. He said if they had suspected I knew what was happening, I might not have made it out of that house. He said there was evidence that they had discussed killing the victim and disposing of his body. He said I had narrowly escaped becoming a victim myself, or a witness they needed to silence. The trial happened 6 months later. Troy and Jake both pleaded guilty to kidnapping, torture, and assault. The victim, Jake's stepfather, testified about what they had done to him. He said Jake had lured him to the house under the pretense of wanting to reconcile their relationship. Jake's mother had recently died, and Jake blamed his stepfather for her death, even though she had died of cancer. Jake wanted revenge. He wanted his stepfather to suffer. So, he and Troy had planned it. They built restraints in the basement. They bought supplies. And then, they took him. The victim described being chained to a wall, unable to move, for days at a time. He described being beaten with a baseball bat, burned with cigarettes and a blowtorch, force-fed alcohol until he vomited, and subjected to constant verbal abuse. He said they would come downstairs at random times, day or night, and torture him for hours. He said they seemed to enjoy it, that they would laugh while he screamed. He said he thought he was going to die, that he had accepted his death, that the only thing keeping him alive was the hope that someone would find him. He also testified that on December 28th, the night I was at the house, they had brought him food and told him they had company upstairs and he needed to be quiet. But he could not be quiet. He screamed as loud as he could, hoping someone would hear him, hoping someone would call the police. But no one did. I did not. I left instead, and he screamed and cried and begged for hours after I left, and Troy and Jake came downstairs and beat him unconscious for making noise while they had a guest over. I sat in the courtroom and listened to his testimony, and I felt crushing guilt. I felt like I had failed him. I felt like I was partially responsible for his suffering. I felt like I should have known, should have done something, should have called the police. The victim's family did not blame me. They said I was just a kid, that I could not have known, that I did nothing wrong. But I blamed myself. Troy was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Jake was sentenced to 35 years. The judge said their actions were barbaric, sadistic, and showed a complete disregard for human life. He said they were a danger to society and needed to be removed from it for as long as possible. Troy and Jake showed no remorse. They sat in the courtroom staring straight ahead, expressionless, and when the victim gave his impact statement, describing how they had destroyed his life, how he could no longer work, how he had PTSD, how he could not sleep without nightmares, Troy smirked. He smirked, like it was funny, like he was proud of what he had done. After the trial, I started researching basement kidnapping cases. I needed to understand. I needed to know if what happened to me, what almost happened to me, was rare, or if it happened all the time. And what I found terrified me. It happens all the time, way more than people think. I learned about Timothy Hazlitt Jr. from Excelsior Springs, Missouri, in October of 2022, just 2 months before my date with Troy. A 22-year-old black woman escaped from Hazlitt's basement after being held captive for a month. She had been walking in Kansas City when Hazlitt approached her and offered her $350 to go to his house. Once she was in his truck, he pulled a gun on her, took her phones, forced her to take drugs, and drove her to his home. He raped her in the truck, then took her to his basement, restrained her arms and legs, and raped, whipped, tortured, and choked her every day for weeks. She was wearing a trash bag, latex lingerie, and a metal dog collar with a padlock around her neck when she finally escaped while Hazlitt was taking his child to school. She ran to a neighbor's house screaming for help. When police searched Hazlitt's basement, they found a dungeon-style cell where he had restrained his victims and shock devices he used to punish them. They found photos of another woman, Janie Crossdale, who had been missing since June of 2022. In June of 2023, kayakers found a blue barrel with a skeleton inside floating in the Missouri River. The remains were identified as Crossdale. Hazlitt was charged with her murder. The survivor told police that Hazlitt had bragged about killing 2 other women, one by suffocating her with a gas mask and another who died after violent sexual torture. He told her that if she did not listen to him, he would suffocate her and put her in a barrel like the rest of them. Hazlitt had posted racist and misogynistic comments on social media about black women. He targeted them specifically. I learned about Joseph Fritzl from Austria. In 2008, it was discovered that he had imprisoned his own daughter, Elizabeth, in the basement of his family home for 24 years. He lured her down there in 1984 when she was 18 years old, saying he needed help carrying a door. Once she was in the basement, he held an either soap towel on her face until she was unconscious, then locked her in a hidden chamber he had built. He raped her repeatedly over the years, and she gave birth to 7 children in that basement. 3 of the children remained in captivity with her. 1 died shortly after birth, and Fritzl cremated the body, and 3 were brought upstairs and raised by Fritzl and his wife, who he convinced were abandoned foundlings. Elizabeth was finally freed in 2008, when one of the children who had been kept in the basement became seriously ill and needed hospitalization. Fritzl was sentenced to life in prison for rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, slavery, and the murder of the infant who died. I learned about Ariel Castro from Cleveland, Ohio. In 2013, 3 women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, were found alive after being held captive in Castro's basement for over a decade. Knight had been kidnapped in 2002 after following Castro to his home for a free puppy. Berry was kidnapped in 2003 on her way home from work. DeJesus was kidnapped in 2004 after accepting a ride from Castro, who was her friend's father and a school bus driver. All 3 women were chained in the basement, raped repeatedly, and subjected to horrific abuse. Berry gave birth to Castro's child in the basement in 2006. Castro threatened to kill Berry if the baby died. So Knight, who had no medical training, had to deliver the baby in a plastic tub. Castro was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years in prison, but killed himself 1 month into his sentence. These are not isolated incidents. These are not rare exceptions. These are patterns. Predators who build dungeons in their basements. Predators who lure victims with offers of money, puppies, rides, help. Predators who seem normal, charming, trustworthy. Predators who live among us, in small towns and big cities, working normal jobs, raising families, blending in. And their victims are often young women who make the same mistake I did, trusting too easily, ignoring their instincts, believing that someone who seems nice must be safe. I think about that night all the time. I think about how close I came. If I had stayed longer, if I had not heard the scream, if I had believed Troy when he said it was a movie, if they had decided I was a threat, I could be dead. I could be a skeleton in a barrel. I could be a missing person case that goes cold. I could be a name on a list of unsolved disappearances. I also think about the victim, about how he screamed, knowing there was someone upstairs who could help him, knowing I was right there, hoping I would hear him and call the police. And I did hear him. But I left. I was scared, and I left. And he suffered for 2 more days because of that. I went to therapy for a year after the trial. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I had nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks. I could not be in basements. I could not hear screaming in movies without having a breakdown. I could not go on dates. I could not trust anyone. I felt like the world was full of monsters pretending to be normal people, and I could not tell the difference. My therapist helped me process the trauma, helped me understand that I was not responsible for what happened to the victim, that I was 18 years old and did the best I could in a terrifying situation, but I still feel guilty. I still wonder if I could have done more. I am sharing this story because I want young women to understand the risks. I want them to know that online dating can be dangerous, that meeting strangers can be dangerous, that trusting people based on a profile and a week of messages can be dangerous. I want them to know the predators look normal. They do not look like monsters. They look like Troy. Attractive, charming, friendly. They have normal jobs, normal lives, normal social media profiles. They blend in. I also want young women to know that if something feels wrong, it probably is. If your instincts are screaming at you that something is off, listen to them. Do not worry about being rude. Do not worry about hurting someone's feelings. Do not worry about overreacting. Your safety is more important than politeness. If you hear something that scares you, leave. If someone makes you uncomfortable, leave. If a situation feels dangerous, leave. And call the police. Even if you are not sure, even if you think you might be wrong, call the police. The statistics on online dating violence are terrifying. According to studies, approximately 1 in 10 online dating profiles are fake or created for malicious purposes. Between 2011 and 2016, reports of sexual assault linked to online dating increased by 450% in the UK. In the US, cases of rape, assault, and murder connected to dating apps have been rising steadily. Women aged 18 to 24 are at the highest risk. And these are just the reported cases. Many more go unreported because victims are ashamed, scared, or do not think anyone will believe them. The victim from Troy and Jake's case never fully recovered. He has permanent nerve damage from the beatings. He has PTSD and depression. He cannot work. He lives on disability. He told me, when I reached out to him after the trial to apologize, that he does not blame me. He said I saved my own life by leaving when I did, and that is what matters. He said he is just glad I survived. But I still feel like I failed him, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I am 20 years old now. I moved out of Hoisington. I am in college, studying nursing like I always planned. I do not use dating apps anymore. I do not go on dates with people I do not know well. I do not go to anyone's house alone. I am cautious, maybe overly cautious, but I am alive. And I am sharing this story because I want other young women to be cautious too. I want them to be safe. I want them to trust their instincts. I want them to know that the scream you hear might not be a movie. It might be real. And if you hear it, do not ignore it. Do not convince yourself it is nothing. Listen to it and act. Trust your instincts. They exist to keep you alive. And if something feels wrong, it is wrong. Leave. Call the police. Save yourself. And maybe, if you are lucky, you will save someone else too. The scream I heard was real, and I will never forget it. I have been narrating horror stories for over 4 years now, and in that time I have received thousands of submissions from people all over the world. Some are clearly exaggerated, some are outright fiction, but every once in a while I receive something that makes me pause, something that feels too specific, too raw, too real to be anything but the truth. The story I'm about to share is one of those accounts, and after doing some research, I discovered that this type of encounter is far more common than any of us want to believe. What you are about to hear is a first-hand account of what happens when you find yourself alone, vulnerable, and watched by something that should not be there. It was the winter of 2019, and I was working as a food delivery driver in a small town about 40 miles outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. The job was not glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I did not mind the solitude of late night shifts. That particular evening, the temperature had dropped to -15, and the roads were slick with black ice that you could not see until your tires were already spinning. I had just finished my last delivery around 11:30 p.m. when the dispatcher told me I could head home. I remember feeling relieved because the snow had started falling harder and visibility was dropping by the minute. I took the back roads like I always did, a stretch of rural highway that cut through miles of empty farmland and dense pine forests. There were no streetlights out there, no houses for long stretches, just the glow of my headlights against the endless white. I had driven this route hundreds of times, but that night, something felt different. The silence was heavier, the darkness more complete. I turned off my radio because the static was making me uneasy, and that is when I noticed the first sign that something was wrong. About 3 miles from the main road, I hit a patch of black ice and felt my car begin to slide. I tried to correct, but it was too late. The vehicle drifted sideways and slipped into a shallow ditch, the front end buried in a snowbank at an angle that made it impossible to reverse. I sat there for a moment, my heart pounding, my breath fogging in the cold air. The engine was still running, but I knew I was stuck. I pulled out my phone and called my father, who lived about 20 minutes away. He told me to stay in the car, keep the doors locked, and he would be there as fast as he could. That is when I saw the headlights. They appeared about a quarter mile down the road, just 2 pale yellow orbs hovering in the darkness. At first I thought it might be another driver, someone who could help me. I waited for the vehicle to approach, but it did not move. It just sat there idling, the headlights cutting through the falling snow like 2 unblinking eyes. I watched for what must have been 5 minutes, maybe more, and the car never moved an inch. Then, without warning, the headlights went dark. I felt my stomach drop. Something about the deliberate nature of that action, the way the lights had been extinguished rather than simply turning away, made every instinct in my body scream that I was in danger. I locked my doors again, even though they were already locked, and I kept my phone pressed to my ear, whispering to my father to hurry. That is when I saw the figure. He emerged from the darkness like a shadow peeling itself from the night. A tall, thin silhouette, in a dark hoodie, walking slowly through the snow toward my car. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, each step sinking into the powder with a soft crunch that I could hear even through my closed windows. He stopped about 15 feet from my vehicle and just stood there, staring. I could not see his face beneath the hood, but I could feel his eyes on me, cold, patient, and utterly without emotion. I honked my horn, long, loud blasts that echoed across the empty fields, but he did not react. He did not flinch, did not step back, did not acknowledge the sound in any way. He simply stood there, watching, like a predator waiting for its prey to exhaust itself. I screamed at him through the glass, demanded to know what he wanted, but he remained motionless, a dark stain against the white landscape. I did not know how long we stayed like that, me trapped in my car, him standing in the snow, but it felt like hours. My phone battery was dying, and my father was still 10 minutes away. I was alone, helpless, and completely at the mercy of whatever this stranger intended to do. And then I noticed the crow. It was perched on a fence post about 20 yards behind a man, a large black shape that stood out starkly against the snow. At first I thought nothing of it, just a bird seeking shelter from the storm. But, as I watched, I realized it was not moving. It was not ruffling its feathers, not shifting its weight, not doing any of the small, restless movements that birds normally make. It was perfectly, unnaturally still, its head turned toward me, its eyes fixed on my car with the same unblinking intensity as the man in the hoodie. I told myself it was just a coincidence, just my fear playing tricks on me. But I could not shake the feeling that the bird was watching me, tracking my every movement, with an awareness that no animal should possess. Its eyes caught the dim glow of my dashboard lights, and they seemed to gleam with something that looked almost like intelligence, almost like recognition. The man finally moved. He turned slowly, deliberately, and began walking back toward the darkness from which he had come. But, before he disappeared, he paused and looked over his shoulder, and I swear I saw his hand rise, just slightly, as if he was holding something, a tool, a weapon, something meant for breaking and entering. Then he was gone, swallowed by the night, and the crow took flight, its wings beating silently as it followed him into the void. My father arrived 7 minutes later. He found me shaking, barely coherent, unable to explain what I had just experienced. He helped me out of the ditch and drove me home. And it was not until the next morning that he told me what he had seen. When he had pulled up behind my car, he had noticed footprints in the snow. A single set of tracks leading from the road to a spot just 15 feet from my driver's side door. But the footprints did not continue to the car. They stopped abruptly, as if the person had been standing there for a long time, waiting, watching, and then had simply walked away. He also found something else, something he did not tell me about until weeks later. Near the fence post where the crow had been perched, there was a small pile of feathers, black and glossy, arranged in a perfect circle on the snow. In the center of the circle was a single muddy handprint, too large to belong to any bird, pressed into the frozen ground as if someone had knelt there, watching my car from a distance. I have done research since that night, trying to find explanations, trying to convince myself that what I experienced was just a random encounter with a stranded motorist or a confused stranger. But the more I looked, the more I found stories that matched my own. In 2017, a woman in rural Wisconsin reported being followed by a man in a dark hoodie who appeared at her car window after she slid into a ditch during a snowstorm. She described him as standing motionless for nearly 20 minutes before walking away when another car approached. In 2020, a truck driver in northern Michigan shared his account of being watched by a figure who emerged from the woods after his vehicle broke down on an isolated stretch of highway. He said the man had been holding something that looked like a crowbar, and that a large black bird had been circling overhead the entire time. There are dozens of these stories, scattered across Reddit threads and true crime forums and local news archives, all describing the same scenario. A stranded driver, a silent watcher, and an animal that seems to appear at every scene, always watching, always still, always positioned in a way that feels intentional. I do not know who the man in the snow was. I do not know what he wanted or what he would have done if my father had not arrived when he did. But I do know this: he is still out there, somewhere, waiting for the next driver to slide off the road, the next person to find themselves alone and helpless in the dark, and wherever he goes, that crow follows, perched at a distance, never blinking, never moving, watching with eyes that hold something far older and far more terrible than any bird should possess. To this day, I cannot drive past that stretch of road without checking my mirrors, without scanning the tree line for a dark shape that should not be there. And every time I see a crow, I feel that same cold dread settle into my bones, that same certainty that I am being watched by something that knows exactly where I am and exactly what I am afraid of. Some nights, when the snow falls heavy and the roads turn to ice, I still hear that soft crunch of footsteps in the silence, still see that dark figure standing motionless in my rearview mirror, still feel those unblinking eyes fixed on the back of my neck, and I know with a certainty that I cannot explain that he is still waiting, still watching, still patient. He has all the time in the world. I have spent years researching cases of twin bonds, psychiatric anomalies, and unexplained medical events. I have read countless journals, interviewed dozens of specialists, and reviewed hundreds of case files. And in all my research, nothing has prepared me for what I am about to share with you. This is not folklore. This is not urban legend. This is documented fact. The medical records exist. The autopsies were performed. The witnesses are real, and what happened cannot be explained by science alone. I first learned about the Thompson twins in the summer of 2014, when I was working on a research project about codependency in siblings. Their case file had been buried in a North Carolina hospital archive for over 50 years, marked with a simple red stamp that read, "Unexplained Death." But it was the handwritten notepaper clipped to the file that caught my attention. It said, "Both subjects died within 5 minutes of each other in separate wards. No apparent cause, no toxicology findings, positioned on beds to face each other through walls." The story begins in 1951 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Margaret and Elizabeth Thompson were 21-year-old identical twins who had just moved into a boarding house to work at a cigarette factory. Their father, Robert, helped them carry boxes up to their shared room that September afternoon. He was proud of his daughters for taking this step into adulthood, even though it broke his heart to see them leave home. But Margaret and Elizabeth were not just close siblings. They were identical in ways that went far beyond physical appearance. They were both 5 feet 3 inches tall. Both had round faces and dark hair that they styled exactly the same way. They both played piano. They both sang in the glee club. They both made excellent grades. But it was the things they shared that should not have been possible that made people uneasy. When Margaret developed an abscess in her tooth, Elizabeth developed one at the exact same time. When Margaret needed glasses for her deteriorating vision, Elizabeth begged for glasses too, even though her eyesight was perfect. They got sick together with illnesses that were not contagious. They moved in sync. They finished each other's sentences. They slept in the same bed. They could not bear to be apart for even a few hours. This level of twin connection is not unprecedented. The famous case of June and Jennifer Gibbons, known as the Silent Twins, showed a similar pathological bond. These British twins spoke only to each other in their own invented language and were eventually committed to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital in 1981. Like the Thompson twins, the Gibbons sisters displayed an obsessive codependency that psychiatrists could not break. And like the Thompson twins, their story would end in an inexplicable death that medical science could not explain. 2 years after moving to the boarding house, Margaret unexpectedly quit her job and returned home to her parents' house in Pearl Lear, North Carolina. She showed up one Friday evening with her luggage, looking pale and withdrawn. When her father Robert asked where Elizabeth was, Margaret said something that sent a chill through the household. "She is staying there," Margaret said flatly. "She does not hate her job. She is keeping it. I am coming home." This was unprecedented. In 21 years, the twins had never been apart. They had never made different choices. They had never wanted different things. Robert and his wife were deeply concerned, but they let Margaret move back into her childhood bedroom. They expected Elizabeth to visit on weekends as she always did. But Elizabeth did not come home that weekend. Or the next. Or the one after that. Margaret shut herself in her bedroom and barely came out. She stopped eating. She stopped talking to anyone. The vibrant, social young woman they had known became a ghost in their own home. She lost weight at an alarming rate. Her skin became pale, almost translucent. Dark circles formed under her eyes. She looked like she was wasting away from the inside. The only time Margaret showed any sign of life was when Elizabeth finally did come home to visit. The moment Elizabeth walked through the door, it was like watching someone flip a switch. Margaret's eyes brightened. Her posture straightened. She smiled. She laughed. For those brief weekend hours, she was herself again. The twins would talk and laugh and move around the house together, always touching, always within arm's reach of each other. But when Sunday evening came and Elizabeth had to return to the factory, Margaret would go back to her room and shut the door. The light would go out of her eyes. The silence would return. Week after week, this pattern continued. Margaret was literally dying without her sister. Then, 2 years after Margaret had come home, Elizabeth quit her job at the factory and moved back home as well. Robert and his wife were relieved. They thought, finally, the girls will be together again. Finally, Margaret will get better. They were wrong. When Elizabeth came home, the twins did not return to their old selves. Instead, they both retreated into Margaret's bedroom and shut the door. They barely came out. They stopped eating almost entirely. When their parents knocked and asked if they wanted dinner, the door would open just a crack, and both faces would appear at the same time. "We are not hungry," they would say in perfect unison. Then the door would close again. They slept in the same bed. They wore the same clothes. When they did leave the bedroom, they walked side by side so closely that their shoulders touched. They moved in perfect synchronization, like mirror images. If one turned her head, the other turned at the exact same moment. If one sat down, the other sat at the exact same time. Their parents were terrified. This went beyond close siblings. This was something else, something wrong. The twins stopped eating almost entirely. Their bodies became skeletal. Their parents begged them to eat, brought food to their room, left trays outside the door. But Margaret and Elizabeth would not touch it. It was as if they were starving themselves deliberately, though neither would say why. After several weeks of watching their daughters waste away, Robert and his wife took the twins to see a psychiatrist. The diagnosis came quickly: schizophrenia. The psychiatrist prescribed antipsychotic medication and assured the parents that with proper treatment, the girls would recover. But the medication did nothing. If anything, the twins got worse. They spent even more time locked in their room. They became paranoid around anyone who was not their twin. Even their own parents frightened them. They would only speak to each other, and only in whispers that no one else could hear. In modern psychiatric research, this type of codependent psychosis is sometimes called shared delusional disorder, or folie à deux. But the Thompson twins' case went beyond shared delusions. They were exhibiting what some researchers call psychotic twinning, a rare phenomenon where identical twins develop identical psychiatric symptoms simultaneously. Studies have documented cases where one twin becomes psychotic and the other develops the exact same symptoms, even when separated by thousands of miles. The twins were hospitalized multiple times over the next year. Each time they would improve in the hospital because they were being monitored, being forced to eat, being given their medication under supervision. But the moment they returned home, they would regress. Back to the bedroom, back to the silence, back to starving themselves. The doctors and the family came to a terrible conclusion. The girls were not going to get better as long as they were together. Their bond was not helping them. It was killing them. The decision was made to separate them. For their own good, the twins would be committed to the psychiatric hospital again, but this time they would be placed in different wards. They would not be allowed to see each other. The hope was that forced separation would break the codependency and allow each twin to develop as an individual. On April 11, 1962, Margaret and Elizabeth Thompson were committed to the hospital for the last time. They begged to be kept together. They screamed. They cried. They clutched at each other as staff members tried to separate them. But the decision had been made. At 1 o'clock in the morning on April 12th, they were placed in rooms on opposite ends of the hospital. Different wings. Different floors. No contact. At 12:55 a.m., a nurse doing rounds in the West Wing found Margaret lying on her side in bed. She was dead. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of distress, no note, no explanation. She simply looked like she had fallen asleep and never woken up. At 1 o'clock a.m., exactly 5 minutes later, a doctor checking on Elizabeth in the East Wing found her in the exact same position, dead, lying on her side, peaceful, as if asleep. The hospital went into crisis mode. 2 patients dead within minutes of each other? The North Carolina State Board of Investigators was called in, then the FBI. Autopsies were performed. Toxicology tests were run. The rooms were searched for evidence of poison, of suicide, of any explanation. There was nothing. No poison, no drugs, no signs of self-harm, no signs of violence or foul play. Their hearts had simply stopped beating at almost the exact same moment. While they were in separate wards on opposite ends of the hospital, medical examiners could not find a single thing wrong with them. No disease, no infection, no cardiac abnormality, nothing. The cause of death was officially listed as ill-defined and unknown. But there was one detail that everyone who saw the bodies remembered. The detail that no one could explain. The detail that still makes me uneasy when I think about it. When the twins were found, they were not lying straight in their beds like most people do when they sleep. They were positioned at an odd angle, almost perpendicular to the natural flow of the bed. At first it seemed like a random detail, just the way they happened to fall when they died, but then someone noticed something. If you removed all the walls between the two rooms in your mind, if you traced a straight line from where Margaret was lying to where Elizabeth was lying across the hospital, the twins were positioned exactly to face each other. They had somehow, impossibly, positioned their bodies to be looking directly at one another when they died, even though they were in completely different wings of the building with no way of knowing where the other was. This is the same phenomenon that was documented when Jennifer Gibbons died in 1993. Before being transferred from Broadmoor Hospital to a lower security facility in Wales, Jennifer told journalist Marjorie Wallace, "I am going to die. We have decided." On the day of the transfer, Jennifer collapsed suddenly on the bus and fell into a coma. She died that evening from unexplained acute myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart. No drugs were found in her system, no poison, no medical explanation. June, her twin, was in perfect health. The medical examiner concluded that Jennifer had somehow willed herself to die to free her sister from their toxic bond. The only theory that anyone could offer about the Thompson twins was similar. One of the doctors who had treated them at the hospital believed that the separation had caused such extreme psychological distress that the twins had, through sheer force of will, shut down their own bodies, that their need to be together, their inability to exist as separate people, was so profound that death was preferable to separation. In psychiatric literature, there is no official term for this phenomenon, but some researchers call it sympathetic death or twin death syndrome. There are documented cases of twins dying within hours or days of each other with no medical explanation. One study from the University of Washington followed over 15,000 twin pairs and found that when one twin died, the surviving twin had a significantly elevated risk of death in the following months, far beyond what could be explained by shared genetics or environment. But the Thompson twins did not die hours or days apart. They died 5 minutes apart, in separate rooms, with no communication, with no apparent cause. I have read their autopsy reports a dozen times. I have interviewed surviving family members. I have spoken with medical experts who have reviewed the case, and no one can explain it. No one can tell me how two healthy young women simply stopped living at the same moment in separate rooms. The psychiatrist who recommended their separation carried guilt about their deaths for the rest of his life. He died in 1987, but in a letter he wrote years after the incident, he said, "I believed I was helping them. I believe separation was the answer. I did not understand that for some twins, separation is not just difficult, it is impossible." Their bond was not psychological. It was something deeper, something I do not think medical science can explain. The Thompson twins were buried together in a single plot at the family cemetery in Pearl-Lear. Their shared headstone reads, "Together in life, together in death." Their father Robert died in 1973, never having spoken publicly about what happened to his daughters. Their mother passed in 1989. The few family members who are still alive refuse to discuss the case. I think about Margaret and Elizabeth Thompson often. I think about the moment when they were separated. I think about what must have gone through their minds as they lay in those hospital beds, alone for the first time in their lives. I think about how they somehow knew where the other was, how they positioned themselves to face each other through walls and floors and distance. Medical science tells us that what happened is impossible, that two people cannot will themselves to die, that twins cannot communicate telepathically, that there is no such thing as a bond so strong it transcends physical separation. But the medical records are real. The death certificates are real. The autopsy reports are real. And the truth is that sometimes science cannot explain everything. Sometimes there are bonds between people that go beyond what we understand. Bonds that are stronger than the will to live. Bonds that not even death can truly sever. The Thompson twins died over 60 years ago, but their case file remains in that hospital archive, marked with that same red stamp, unexplained death. And I suspect it will remain unexplained forever. Because some things are not meant to be understood. Some connections between people exist in a place beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond the reach of medicine or science. All we can do is acknowledge that they exist and hope that we never have to witness them ourselves. I want to make something very clear before I tell you this story. I never found out who he was. I never found out why he chose me. And I never found out what he was planning to do. All I know is that on a freezing January night in 2023, someone watched me from the shadows of a gas station storage room for over an hour. And if I had not called the police when I did, I might not be here to tell you about it. My name is Jordan. I am 24 years old. And this is what happened to me. I was working the overnight shift at a Speedway gas station on the outskirts of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The job was not glamorous. Minimum wage, no benefits, standing behind bulletproof glass from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. But I needed the money. I was a student at Grand Valley State University, studying criminal justice, working toward my degree while trying to pay rent. The overnight shift paid an extra $1 an hour, and since I had insomnia anyway, it made sense. Most nights were quiet. A few truckers stopping for coffee, some third shift workers grabbing energy drinks, the occasional drunk person buying cigarettes. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Or so I thought. January 19th, 2023. It was one of the coldest nights of the winter. The temperature had dropped to -15 degrees. Snow was falling steadily, covering everything in a thick white blanket. The roads were empty. No cars. No people. Just me. And the hum of the fluorescent lights. I was restocking shelves around 2 in the morning when I saw it. An old SUV. Dark blue, maybe a 2010 Ford Explorer. It pulled up to pump number 3 and stopped. The engine turned off. The lights went dark. And then, nothing. I waited. Usually people get out right away. They swipe their card, pump their gas, maybe come inside for snacks. But this SUV just sat there. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I started to feel uneasy. I walked to the window and looked out. The SUV was still there. No movement inside. No one getting out. Just sitting there, in the cold. I thought maybe the driver had fallen asleep, or maybe the car had broken down. So I grabbed my coat, unlocked the door, and walked outside. The cold hit me like a wall. -15 feels like knives on your skin. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the SUV. As I got closer, I could see through the windows. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat was empty. The whole car was empty. But the doors were unlocked. And when I looked down, I saw them. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading away from the driver's side door. Around the side of the building, my heart started to race. Someone had gotten out of the SUV. Someone had walked around the building. But where were they now? I followed the footprints. They led to the back of the gas station, and then stopped, right at the back door. The door that should have been locked. But it was open, just slightly. Like someone had pushed it open, and left it that way. I felt my stomach drop. Someone was inside. I went back to the front of the building. I locked the main door behind me and stood behind the counter. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a delivery person. Maybe it was my manager. Maybe it was nothing. But then I heard it. A thump. From the storage room. The storage room was in the back of the building. Past the aisles of chips and candy. Past the walk-in cooler. Down a short hallway. I had been back there earlier to grab supplies. But I had not heard anyone come in. I stood there, frozen, listening. Another thump. And then, silence. I pulled out my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered. I whispered that someone had broken into the gas station, that I could hear them in the back, that I was alone. She told me to stay on the line. She said officers were on their way. She said not to confront the person, to stay where I was, to wait, to tell him. But I could not just stand there. I needed to know if someone was really back there. I needed to see. So I walked slowly down the aisle, past the chips, past the cooler, down the hallway. The storage room door was open, just a crack. I could see the light from my phone flashlight reflecting off something inside. Puddles. Puddles of melted snow on the concrete floor. Someone had been back here. Someone was still back here. I pushed the door open a little more. And that is when I saw him. He was standing between the shelves. Tall, maybe 6'3". Broad shoulders, a thick beard, wearing a dark coat and jeans. Just standing there, staring at me, not moving, not speaking, just staring. I froze. I could not breathe. I could not move. We locked eyes for what felt like forever. And then, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing smile. Like he had been waiting for me. Like this was exactly what he wanted. I backed away slowly. I did not run. I did not scream. I just backed away, keeping my eyes on him. He did not follow. He just stood there, watching. I made it back to the front counter. I locked the storage room hallway door behind me. I told the dispatcher what I saw. She said the police were 2 minutes away. 2 minutes. I stood there shaking, staring at the door, waiting, listening, and then I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the back of the building. He was moving. The footsteps got louder, closer. I could hear him in the hallway now, right on the other side of the locked door. I held my breath. The door handle turned. It rattled. But it was locked. He could not get through. And then, the footsteps stopped. Silence. The police arrived 3 minutes later. 2 officers. They came through the front door with their hands on their guns. I told them everything. The SUV. The footprints. The man in the storage room. They told me to stay behind the counter. They went to the back. I watched them disappear down the hallway. I heard them shout, "Police, show yourself." I heard doors opening. Footsteps. And then, nothing. After what felt like forever, they came back. They said the storage room was empty. The back door was open. There were wet footprints leading out into the field behind the building, but the man was gone. The officers asked me to describe him again. I told them everything I could remember. Tall, bearded, dark coat, dark jeans. They wrote it all down. They said they would check the security cameras. But when they pulled up the footage, there was a problem. The camera that covered the back of the building was not working. It had been spray painted over. Someone had disabled it before coming inside. The only camera that worked was the one at the front. It showed the SUV pulling up. It showed the driver getting out, but the angle was wrong. You could not see his face, just a dark figure, walking out of frame. The officers ran the license plate. The SUV had been reported stolen 2 days earlier from a Walmart parking lot in Kalamazoo. Whoever this man was, he had planned this. He had stolen a car. He had disabled the cameras. He had waited for a night when the station would be empty. And then he had come inside to watch me. The police stayed until my shift ended. They filed a report. They said they would patrol the area. They said if I saw the man again, to call immediately. But they never found him. The SUV was found abandoned 3 days later in a wooded area near Holland, Michigan. It had been wiped clean. No fingerprints. No DNA. Nothing. And the man was never identified. I quit that job the next day. I could not go back. I could not stand behind that counter knowing that someone had been watching me from the shadows, knowing that they had come inside, knowing that they had stood there, staring. I started having nightmares, dreams where I was back in that gas station, and the man was there, standing in the storage room. But this time, when I backed away, he followed. I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. Unable to go back to sleep, I went to therapy. I was diagnosed with PTSD. The therapist said it was normal after a traumatic event, that I had been in real danger, that my body was still processing the fear. Since then, I have researched cases like mine, cases where people were stalked at their jobs, cases where predators watched from the shadows, and what I found was terrifying. I learned about Samantha Stites from Michigan. She was stalked for 13 years by a man named Michael Thomas. He followed her to multiple states. He showed up at her work. He sent her thousands of messages, and in October of 2022, he kidnapped her. He broke into her home in Traverse City, restrained her, and took her to a soundproof bunker he had built inside a storage unit. The bunker had food, water, supplies. He had planned to keep her there for weeks. Samantha convinced him to let her go after 14 hours by promising to stay quiet. The moment she was free, she went to the police. Thomas was arrested. In December of 2023, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping, torture, and aggravated stalking. I learned about Katie Poria. She was 19 years old in 1999. She was working an overnight shift at a gas station in Minnesota. Just like me, a man came into the station, grabbed her from behind the counter, and abducted her. She was never seen alive again. The suspect was eventually identified and convicted. But Katie was gone. Her family never got to say goodbye. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men have been stalked at some point in their lives. That is over 19 million people in the United States. Most stalkers are someone the victim knows, a former partner, a co-worker, an acquaintance. But about 25% of stalking cases involve strangers, people like the man I saw, people who watch from the shadows, people who plan, people who wait. I think about that night all the time. I think about the man standing between the shelves, staring at me, smiling. I think about the fact that he had been there for over an hour, watching me stock shelves, watching me work, watching me. And I had no idea. I think about what he was planning. Was he going to wait until I came into the storage room? Was he going to grab me? Was he going to hurt me? Or was he just watching, enjoying the fear, enjoying the power? I will never know, because I called the police, because I trusted my instincts, because I did not ignore the signs. If you work alone at night, please be careful. Lock your doors, check your cameras, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If you see someone acting strange, call the police. Do not wait. Do not assume it is nothing. Do not think you are overreacting, because the person watching you from the shadows might be planning something terrible, and you might be the only person who can stop them. I am 24 years old. I live in Grand Rapids. I work a day shift job now. 9 to 5, in an office, with other people around. I do not work alone anymore. I do not work at night. And I never will again, because I know what it feels like to be watched, to be hunted, to be seconds away from something horrible. And I know that I was lucky. Lucky that I called the police. Lucky that they arrived in time. Lucky that the man left before he could finish whatever he had planned. To the man in the storage room, wherever you are, I hope you were caught. I hope you face justice for whatever you were planning to do. And I hope you never hurt anyone the way you almost hurt me. But I know the truth. I know you are still out there, still watching, still waiting, still looking for your next target, and that terrifies me. Because the next person might not call the police. The next person might not be lucky. The next person might not escape. Stay safe. Trust your instincts. And if you see something that does not feel right, do not ignore it. Because the watcher in the shadows might be waiting for you too.